ಈಗ ನಮ್ಮ ತೆಲಂಗಾಣದ ಕರುಣಾಕರ್ ಅವರು
అందరికీ శుభోదయం. రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం కార్యక్రమంలో భాగంగా 3వ రోజు విజయవంతంగా కొనసాగుతున్న ఈ ప్రోగ్రాంకి విచ్చేసిన వివిధ రాష్ట్రాల నుంచి వచ్చిన రైతులకు, కౌలు రైతులకు, ఈ వ్యవస్థను నడిపిస్తున్న మేధావి వర్గానికి అందరికీ కూడా ఈ యొక్క కార్యక్రమం నుంచి శుభాకాంక్షలు తెలియజేస్తూ, అదేవిధంగా ఆర్గానిక్ వ్యవసాయం, ప్రకృతి వ్యవసాయం, కౌలు రైతులు, మహిళా రైతులు, ఈ సృష్టి నిర్మించడానికి కారణం ఒక మహిళ. ఆ మహిళ సృష్టిని సృష్టిస్తుంది, వ్యవసాయాన్ని సృష్టిస్తుంది. కానీ ఆ మహిళకు ఎక్కడ కూడా రావాల్సిన గుర్తింపు కానీ రాలేదు. కాబట్టి మనం మహిళా రైతులను ప్రోత్సహించాలి. వన్ ఉమెన్ కెన్ డూ ఎనీథింగ్ ఇన్ దిస్ వరల్డ్. ఖచ్చితంగా ఈ విషయాన్ని మనం గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాలి. కాబట్టి ఒక చిన్న పాట ద్వారా నేను మీ ముందుకు వస్తున్నాను. నా పేరు కరుణాకర్, నాది తెలంగాణ రాష్ట్రం. నేను రైతు స్వరాజ్ వేదిక యాదాద్రి భువనగిరి జిల్లా కోఆర్డినేటర్గా వర్క్ చేస్తున్నాను. థ్యాంక్ యూ. రేలా రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం వెన్నెలా వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా చెల్లెలా. రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం వెన్నెలా వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా చెల్లెల. రేలా రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం చెల్లెలా వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే ఆ వెన్నెల. రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం వెన్నెల వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా చెన్నెల. మన జీవిత కాధారము చెల్లెలా ఆర్గానిక్ వ్యవసాయమే నా చెల్లెల. మన జీవితానికి ఆధారం చెల్లెలా ఆర్గానిక్ వ్యవసాయం నా చెల్లెల. రేలా రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రసాయనిక ఎరువులొద్దవే చెల్లెలా, సేంద్రియ ఎరువులు ముద్దమ్మో నా చెల్లెలా. రసాయనిక ఎరువులొద్దమ్మో చెల్లెలా, సేంద్రియ ఎరువులు ముద్దమ్మో నా చెల్లెలా. రేలా రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం చెల్లెలా వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా వెన్నెల. రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం చెల్లెలా వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా చెల్లెల. పొలంలో నీ చేతులే చెల్లెలా, పొలంలో నీ చేతులే చెల్లెలా, కంచంలో మెతుకులాయనే నా వెన్నెల. పొలంలో నీ చేతులే నా చెల్లెలా, కంచంలో మెతుకులాయనే నా చెల్లెల. రేలా రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం చెల్లెలా వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా చెల్లెల. ఆర్ఎస్వి జెండా ఎత్తవే నా చెల్లెల, హక్కులకై కదం తొక్కవే నా వెన్నెల. ఆర్ఎస్వి జెండా ఎత్తవే చెల్లెల, హక్కులకై కదం తొక్కవే నా చెల్లెల. రేలా రే రేలా 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 రే రేలా 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 రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం చెల్లెలా వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా చెల్లెల. రైతు స్వరాజ్ సమ్మేళనం వెన్నెల వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా చెల్లెల, వర్ధిల్లుతుంది చూడవే నా చెల్లెల. థ్యాంక్ యూ. ఇప్పటికిప్పుడే నాకు అవకాశం వచ్చింది. ఈ పాట ఇప్పటికిప్పుడే నేను రాసి ఇక్కడ పాడుతున్నాను. థ్యాంక్ యూ.
Thank you. He said he's got an opportunity to sing and he composed the song just now, right now, and he sang it. And he's Karunakar from Telangana. Good morning, Swagatam, Namaskara. We'll start this session. We wanted to start it on time, but we are running late. Before we start, there are some small announcements. May I request Kavita Srinivasan to be here, please, to translate in Kannada. And if Sudha Nagavarapu is in the hall, can she let me know? Okay, can you please come here once? Rajesh, talk to her. Rajesh, talk to her once about that. So, I want to inform you all that in ASHA, Alliance for Sustainable and Holistic Agriculture, we call it the ASHA Kisan Swaraj Network. We have a system of asking people who want to be associated with ASHA. It's not a membership-based organization. It's not an NGO. It's not a union. It's a volunteer-driven platform for farmers' rights in the country and for sustainable farm livelihoods. We ask people who want to be associated to sign a pledge form. And the pledge form is very simple. We have a 4-pillared Kisan Swaraj Niti, which is centered around income security for all farmers, environmental sustainability in farming, resource rights over land, water, forests, seeds, and so on, in the hands of farming communities. And we talk about food safety and nutritious food for all citizens in India. And these are the 4 pillars, which also always keep in mind that there are marginalized people, marginalized and invisibilized citizens within these 4 aspects that we want to address in Indian farming. And therefore, social equity is a cross-cutting thread. May I request people to please sit down and not converse in the aisles? May I request you to please take your seats? So the pledge form basically is asking those who want to be associated with ASHA that they are committed to this mission and a few other values and principles. There's someone called Shilpa sitting outside who has sheets of paper. If you want to be associated with ASHA in future, please do leave your name, number, and email ID there. That's the first announcement. The second announcement is that today's parallel sessions will begin at 12 noon itself, and one of which is a Karnataka exclusive session on what is the future of farmer movements in Karnataka. So the session is called Farmer Movements of Karnataka, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And that will happen in the auditorium Ganga. There will be interactions with expert farmers like they had happened yesterday. This will be for 1.5 hours today, and they'll happen in the same locations that you had seen yesterday in the Science Bhavan, in the Nala block, and in the convocation hall. You have the names of farmers pasted, and you also have these printouts which give you who's sitting where. We have an interesting session right here in the convocation hall on youth and agriculture. All of these are between 12 and 1:30. Please do decide right now and go into your respective sessions. And the last question that I have is, how many of you might be here for dinner tonight? Can you just show your hands, dinner tonight? I hope somebody's taking a sense of, okay. And if you know that 100 other of your team members are also going to be here for dinner, please do tell someone on the stage, our volunteer here, Nagarjuna, that you know of many more people who will be here for dinner. Kavita, can you just translate, please?
ಅಲಯನ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಲ್ ಹೋಲಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಅಗ್ರಿಕಲ್ಚರ್, ಸಮಗ್ರ ಸುಸ್ಥಿರ ಕೃಷಿಗಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ವೇದಿಕೆ ಇದೆ. ದೇಶವ್ಯಾಪಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದೆ. ಇದು ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು NGO ಅಲ್ಲ, ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು, ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳು ಇದ್ರ ಸದಸ್ಯರಾಗ್ಬೋದು. ನಿಮಗೆ ಸದಸ್ಯರಾಗುವಲ್ಲಿ ಆಸಕ್ತಿ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟ್ರೇಷನ್ ಡೆಸ್ಕಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ಲೆಜ್ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ತುಂಬಿ ನೀವು ಈ ಒಂದು ಸುಸ್ಥಿರ ಕೃಷಿ ಮೇಲೆ, ಪರಿಸರ ಸ್ನೇಹಿ ಕೃಷಿ ಮೇಲೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರುವಂಥ ಬಳಗಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗ್ಬೋದು. ಎರಡನೇದು, ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ಸಭೆಗಳು ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ, ಸಮಾನಾಂತರ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಗಳೇನಿದೆ ಅದು 12 ಗಂಟೆಯಿಂದನೇ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ, 12ರಿಂದ 1ವರೆಗೆ. ಒಂದು ರೈತ ಚಳುವಳಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿನ್ನೆ, ಇಂದು, ನಾಳೆ ಈ ಕುರಿತಾಗಿ ಗಂಗಾ ಆಡಿಟೋರಿಯಂ ಇದೆ. ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಊಟ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರಿ ಅದರ ಹಿಂದೆ ಆ ಕಡೆ ಒಂದು ಆಡಿಟೋರಿಯಂ ಇದೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ 12ರಿಂದ 1ವರೆಗೆ. ಹಾಗೆಯೇ ಪರಿಣಿತ ರೈತರು ಯಾರು ತಮ್ಮ ಅನುಭವವನ್ನು ಚೆಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಕೃಷಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂಥ ರೈತರೊಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ನೀವು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಕಲಿಕೆ, ನಿಮ್ಮ ವಿನಿಮಯ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ನಿನ್ನೆ ಥರನೇ ಇವತ್ತು ಕೂಡ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ 12ರಿಂದ 1ವರೆಗೆ. ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಭವನದಲ್ಲಿ, ನಳಾದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿನ್ನೆ ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿತ್ತು ಅದೇ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು ಕೂಡ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ನೀವು ಹೋಗಿ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡಿ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಅನುಭವವನ್ನು ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಕಲಿತಾ ಯಾವುದರ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು ಕೃಷಿ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಂಗೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಬಗೆಹರಿಸ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. ಮೂರನೇದು, ಯುವಜನರು ಮತ್ತು ಕೃಷಿ, ಇದ್ರ ಕುರಿತಾಗಿ ಕೂಡ ಇವತ್ತು ಗೋಷ್ಠಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ 12ರಿಂದ 1ವರೆಗೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಯಾರೋ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಮೇಲೆ ತಮ್ಮ ಬ್ಲೂಟೂತ್ ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಹತ್ರ ತಂದುಕೊಡಿ. ಸಂಬಡಿ ಇಸ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ದರ್ ಬ್ಲೂಟೂತ್ ಓವರ್ ಹಿಯರ್. ಪ್ಲೀಸ್, ಇಫ್ ಎನಿ ಒನ್ ಆಫ್ ಯು ಫೈಂಡ್ ಇಟ್, ಗಿವ್ ಇಟ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಓವರ್ ಹಿಯರ್. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಊಟಕ್ಕೆ ರಾತ್ರಿ ಯಾರೆಲ್ಲ ಇರ್ತೀರಾ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೈ ಎತ್ತಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ಹಾಗೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಒಬ್ಬರೇ ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜನರದೆಲ್ಲನೂ ಈಗಲೇ ಒಂದು ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟ್ರೇಷನಲ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ಇಲ್ಲೇ ವೇದಿಕೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರ್ತೀವಿ. ಒಟ್ಟು ಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಒಬ್ಬೊಬ್ಬರೇ ಬರೋದಲ್ಲ, ಒಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಗುಂಪಲ್ಲಿ ಇಷ್ಟಿಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಒಂದು ಕೊಟ್ಟರೆ, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ತಿರ್ಗಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಕೂಡ ಹೋಗ್ಬೋದು ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ, ಅದನ್ನು ಲೆಕ್ಕ ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಂಡು, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಅನ್ನ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗೋದು ಬೇಡ. ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಊಟ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಬರ್ತೀವಿ ರಾತ್ರಿ ಅಂದರೆ ಆ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆಯನ್ನು ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಕೊಡಿ.
Dr. D.K. Sadana, who's a livestock expert, has a brief announcement.
Namaskar, very good morning everybody here. And we have our youth also sitting there. To the youth, I want to give a small message that these 3 days here could be a turning point in your life. Because the way you are looking at everything natural and the kind of food, you can take this as a turning point for your lifestyle to take care of the environment, number one. That is extremely important. And the kind of food which you get for 3 days here, I pray in my life I can continue to have this kind of food, but they will stop. Try to add the things which you have seen here being given. And my second point is, the people from Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand and Northeast, we are going to meet for 10 minutes outside the gate here after the program of Yuva. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. You want to say just the Himachal Pradesh? No, I think you don't have to say in Kannada. Rajesh, you start.
Namaste, good morning, namaskaram, vanakkam. So we are at the penultimate plenary in our 3-day ASHA Sammelan. And this session particularly, as you would have seen in the program schedule, is about a segment of our farming community which has remained invisible. And we consider that it is not that they have remained invisible, but have been invisibilized by the system and the society for far too long. And it's time that we talk about the issue, their issues, and also find solutions in the mainstream, not in small silos where these issues have to be discussed. So today we will be talking in this session about those voices. When I talk about voices, with permission, would also want to share an experience I had last evening. I was anchoring a session on farmer collectivization. By the way, my name is Rajesh Krishnan. I'm a farmer from Wayanad and part of the ASHA family. So we were doing this farmer collectivization session, and as you would have seen, every session repeats and for particular language segments. So in our that particular session, we said that we'll do it in English, but then other language people can be there, and then it will be translated simultaneously. So in that one room, after the speakers did their English segments, we heard Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu and Marathi being simultaneously translated, and it was such a harmony of voices. But then we also felt that in many of these mainstream discussions, the voice of the marginalized, the invisibilized are not heard. So here is a space where we thought we should create, where the invisibilized voice, invisibilized farming segments should be seen and be spoken about. And we have discussions on women farmers, on Adivasi farmers, on tenant farmers, and the farm laborers in this segment. So over to you, Kavita, for introduction, and we'll not waste any more time on this.
I'd like to invite मैं द्वारकाबाई वाघमारे जी जो बीड जिले से हैं महाराष्ट्र से, उनको पहले आमंत्रित करती हूँ. आप मंच पे आइएगा. द्वारकाबाई जी ऐसे ही
ಹಲೋ ಮೈಕ್ ಆನ್ ಆಯ್ತದೆ, ಆನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಮೈಕ್.
I request Bhanuja from REDS organization working in Anantapur district of Andhra Pradesh to please come onto the stage. I request Seema Kulkarni from Sopicom and Mahila Kisan Adhikar Manch Makam to please come here. Sharada Gopal from Jagrita Mahila Okuta from Dharwad in Karnataka to please come onto the stage. I request Dr. Jade Gowda from Forest College, Pannampet, Coorg to please join us. A dear friend Akash Badave, who was supposed to be a panelist here, he will join us at some point of time. Last night, unfortunately, there was an accident in which 4 of our Chhattisgarh farmers, delegates got injured. 3 of them are still in a hospital and Akash is with them waiting for the doctor. I request Sudha Nagavarapu from Sangtin in Uttar Pradesh to please join us. On this panel, you have women farmers themselves. On this panel, you have tenant farmers, Adivasi farmers, and panelists representing agricultural workers in terms of speaking for them. That is Sudha. And we will straight away delve into what are the issues of invisibilization and marginalization that a large number of farmers in India face. Remember, in India, we have a national policy for farmers. A national policy for farmers and not a national policy for agriculture. I'm talking about India having a national policy for farmers 2007. This emerged out of the Swaminathan Commission, as it's called. There, the definition given to farmers is very wide and expansive. And it considers even beekeepers as farmers. It considers some primary processors also as farmers. That's the expansive definition given to farmers in India's national policy. But crores of farmers are just not considered as farmers despite their invaluable contribution to our food security, our food sovereignty, and for the economic security of this country itself. We will look into what is the issue here and what needs to be done. We will begin by listening to Dwarkabai Wagmare ji, who's also a sugarcane cutter from Beed district of Maharashtra. हम सुनेंगे पहले द्वारकाबाई वाघमारे जी से उनके बारे में, अपने बारे में, और वो शुगरकेन गन्ना खेती में वो बहुत सारी महिलाएं, पुरुष भी काम करते हैं, मगर एज पेयर्स, मेन एंड विमेन, they work in sugarcane fields during harvest time, and they also migrate from one place to the other within Maharashtra for this employment opportunity that they get. And women farmers in particular, they face a lot of issues. She will talk about her life and the issues of farmers like her. द्वारका बाई जी, मैं आपको माइक वही दूंगी, आप इधर आना चाहेंगे, आप वहाँ बैठ के बात करना चाहेंगे, आइए. आप मराठी में बात करेंगे.
नमस्कार, मी बीड जिल्ह्याहून आलेले आहे, ऊसतोड महिला कामगार. म्हणजे अशी महिलाची परिस्थिती, म्हणजे महिलाचं म्हणजे कुणाला असं जाणवतच नाही की ह्या गोष्टी, की हे महिलाचा पुरस्कार हे कुणी घ्यावा का नाही घ्यावा म्हणून. सकाळी 4 वाजल्यापासून तर संध्याकाळी 10 वाजेपर्यंत म्हणजे महिलाला कसलंच म्हणजे असं त्याच्यातलं हेच नाही. तर मग त्याच्यामुळं मग आम्ही असा निर्णय घेतला की आम्हाला कमी शेती, आणि पुन्हा कसं आहे की शेतीत जर का आम्हाला गेलं तर उच्च जातीचा शेतकरी म्हणजे कमी दर्जातल्या महिलाला म्हणजे कमजोर समजितो. मग त्याच्याने आम्ही असं मकामला जोडल्या गेलेलं आहे. तर मग त्याच्याने त्या सेंद्रिय शेतीचं आम्ही 4 वर्ष झाले आम्ही जोडलेलं आहेत. तर आमचा गावरान बाजरी, तूर, मूग, तीळ याच्यामध्ये व्यवसाय आमचा आम्ही चालू केलेला आहे. म्हणून मग जरा तो पण तरी पण मजुरीला गेल्यानंतर तर आम्हाला कमजोर समजित येतं की कमी जातीतले महिला आहेत आणि ह्यांची काय राळसांड करा, म्हणजे नाही येळेत आलं तरी बी कमी पैसे द्यावा, आणि येळ्यात जरी गेलं तर तुम्ही कामच करीत नाहीत, असं एक म्हणजे समजून माणसाला हे करते. तर मजुरी मग आम्हाला कमी शेती आहे, तर मग गायरान आहे, कमी शेतीमध्ये किती उत्पन्न करायचं आहे. मग त्यो मजुरी म्हणजे मोठा शेतकरी असतो, मग त्याच्यापाशी बैल बारदाना असतो, तर ते म्हणतो नाही माझं तेवढं झाल्याशिवाय मी तुमच्या शेतात येऊ शकत नाही. मग ते कधी त्याच्या पेरल्याच्या नंतर मग आपलं उत्पन्न काय होतं, काहीच नाही होतं आपलं उत्पन्न, का आपलं उत्पन्न कमी होतं. मग ते आम्हाला दर मजुरी बी जास्त हे होत नाही आणि उत्पन्न बी कमी होतंय. मग त्याच्यानंतर मग जर आपण जर गेलो तर आपल्या हानी, तर मग कसं काय नाही आलं मग हे, मग त्याच्याने मग लई अवघड प्रश्न आहेत. आणि असा आहे ऊसतोडीला की आम्ही असा निर्णय ठेवला आहे की ही कबरा करायची ऊसतोडी आपण ही, की ह्या ऊसतोडीपासून आपल्या मुलाबाळाचं बी वाटोळं आहे आणि आपल्या जीव बी सुरक्षित नाही. 4 वाजेपासून उठून तिथं आरोग्याचा प्रश्न आहे, लेकराच्या शिक्षणाचा प्रश्न आहे, म्हणजे आपल्या अनेक आजारावरला प्रसंग तिथं आहे की मुकादम पण तेवढी दखल घेऊ शकत नाही. ऊसतोडीने म्हणजे जास्त म्हणजे महिलाची जास्त नुकसान आहे. म्हणजे पुरुष बी राहतो संघ, पण त्यो काय महिला इतकं काम करू शकत नाही. आणि मग संघटनेला आम्ही ह्याच्या मकामला जोडल्याच्या नंतर मग आम्ही मग ह्या संघटनेमध्ये जोडलेलं आहेत. त्याच्याने मग सीमाताईंनी भरपूर आम्हाला पुरस्कार दिला आहे. ओळखपत्र ऊसतोड कामगाराचं त्याने आम्हाला म्हणजे बीड जिल्ह्यामध्ये मिळवून दिलंय. मी पण ते आणायची होते दाखवायला, पण काय मला म्हणजे येळ भेटल्यानंतर म्हणजे आठवण नव्हती म्हणून मी आणण्याचा प्रयत्न नाही केला.
Quick translation of what Dwarkatai said. So Dwarkatai comes from the sugarcane harvesting family. She's a Dalit woman and a farmer. So she first narrated a little about her farming experience, where this is as a Dalit farmer and as a woman farmer, the kind of experiences she has had. particularly with reference to the agricultural operations. So because they do not have resources, they're the last ones to actually get a plow or bullocks on their farm to start the sowing and the agricultural operations. So how, as a marginalized farmer, they are the last to receive any agricultural inputs and access to any agricultural equipment. And that has an impact on their production, their yields of the farm. And these are also lands which they have actually occupied. It's been a long movement, and these are Gairan lands, community lands which the Dalit families have occupied. To hold on to them, to lay their claim, they do cultivate that every year, but these are the experiences as a Dalit woman farmer. And also as a result of that, most part of the year, they do not have any other major labor availability, and therefore they go into sugarcane harvesting as a unit, as Kavita said, a husband and wife. But the women are completely invisible in this entire arrangement, where the advance is given to the men, and women are working long hours, she said, from morning to night, and all the additional burden of taking care of the family, cooking, cleaning, managing to get water from, long distances, because they are actually staying at the sugarcane field sites. So all of this takes a toll on the women and no wages in hand. So on both counts, the experiences of her as a Dalit and as a woman farmer and as a woman cane cutter is what Dwarkatai shared. But she also shared the hopes, having been associated with not just Makam, but there's also been a movement within the area where they now have organized into smaller groups, basically for organic farming, agroecology. And this is to, in a way, rebel and say that we do not want to, no longer want to go for cane cutting. We want farming as a viable option. So that is one experience she shared. And the second is the Ustod Kamgar Mahila Sangatna, which was just recently launched to raise specific issues of the women cane cutters. So there are unions of sugar cane cutters, but they do not raise issues of women cane cutters. And therefore that Sangatna is of what she's a part of. She shared experiences of that as well.
Thank you. I'll just say, द्वारका भाई आप आगे बढ़ो, आप कहेंगे हम आपके साथ हैं, ना निद्दीवे ना विद्दीवी whatever. द्वारका भाई आप आगे बढ़ो, द्वारका भाई आप आगे बढ़ो,
आपके साथ है.
जगन्नाथ जी, बहुत सारे लोग जो यहाँ बैठे हैं हमारे प्यारे मित्र हैं, सभी लोग प्यारे मित्र हैं, मगर पर्सनली बहुत सालों से जिनको मैं जानती हूँ. जगन्नाथ माझी जी कोंद आदिवासी है, रायगढ़ जिला ओडिशा से, और बहुत सालों से इनका ये काम रहा है कि कोंद आदिवासियों के नौजवान पीढ़ी जो है उनका सोच किस तरफ जा रहा है, और उसके बीच में और जो इसके पहले वाले ज़माने के लोग जो है उनके बीच में जो दूर बढ़ता जा रहा है, उसके बारे में काफ़ी काम इन्होंने किया है. मैं जगन्नाथ माझी जी से रिक्वेस्ट करती हूँ कि वो बताएं कि आदिवासी किसानों के मुद्दे क्या है, आखिरकार आप क्या देखते हैं वहाँ पे. आप इधर बैठ के बात करना चाहेंगे? हाँ,
बात करूं. नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम जगन्नाथ माझी है और मैं ओडिशा से आया हूँ. मैं कोंद आदिवासी खुद ही है, और जो हमारा जो एरिया में बहुत सारा जो हमारा जो आदिवासी लोगों के साथ हम काम करते हैं, कि मैं ज़िंदगी में पहली बार इतना साथियों के साथ मुलाकात होने के मौका मिला कि हम सब कुटुंब यहाँ आए हैं। कुटुंब का मतलब है हम जो सोचते हैं सिर्फ इंसान नहीं है, और कुटुंब मतलब सब हम मिलके रहना है। कि हमारा जो सोच है कि जो शरीर हिसाब से नहीं है हमारी पास है, लेकिन जो पूर्वज हमारी साथ शरीर हिसाब से नहीं है, वो लोग भी हमारे साथ है। कुटुंब का मतलब है नदी, झरना, पहाड़, खेती, चिड़िया, मुकड़े, जो चिट्टी विटी सब मिला के हम जब रहते हैं तो उनको हम कुटुंब कहते हैं। तो अभी क्या हो रहा है कि ये सब धीरे धीरे से इंसान खुद को मैं ही मेरा अलावा और किसी को नहीं रहना है, ऐसा कुछ सोच धीरे धीरे से सब कुछ क्षेत्र में आ रहा है। जैसे खेती भी हो और बहुत सारा चीज़ें हैं। खेती का मतलब हम जो सोचते हैं खाना सिर्फ चास में नहीं होता है, बहुत सारा चीज़ें हैं जो खेती के साथ, जो फसल जो खाने के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है। परंपरा और जंगल, नदी, झरना सब के साथ जो जुड़ा हुआ है जो खाना है, तब जाके हमारा जो खाना है संपूर्ण होता है। तो अभी वो जो सोच है, वो जो व्यवस्था है, हमारा जो व्यवस्था है धीरे धीरे ख़त्म होते जा रहा है। और जो एक ही टाइप का जो सोच है आके जो जिस तरह पर हमारी जो खेती का और जो सोच का जो व्यवस्था ऊपर जो नुकसान कर रहा है, तो उसको हम कैसे बचा के रखेंगे, उसी हिसाब से जो काम करने हैं। शिक्षा पढ़ाई करना, तो शिक्षा के ऊपर भी किसी टाइप का जो शिक्षा होना चाहिए, खेती हमारा किसी टाइप का जो खेती होना चाहिए, जंगल किसी टाइप का जो जंगल होना चाहिए। जो जंगल का मतलब केवल एक पेड़ को हम नहीं समझते हैं। जंगल का मतलब है वहाँ लता, जानवर, चिड़िया, कीड़ा, सब कुछ जो रहते हैं, फल फूल सब जो रहते हैं, उनको जंगल हम मानते हैं। तो वो जो चीज़ें हैं जो नष्ट हो रहा है, और जो हमारा जो व्यवस्था है, ये जो संस्कृति है, जो परंपराएं हैं, जो परंपरा के साथ पूरा स्ट्रांग से जुड़ा हुआ है हमारा जो खेती, जो हमारा जो मास का बोलते हैं आदिवासी भाषा से, जो बीज को जो आदल वादल करना है, बीज को जो पूजा करना है, ये सारे जो व्यवस्था है, जो पूजा परंपरा और खेती जंगल के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है। और एक अगर नुकसान हो जाएगा तो सब कुछ नुकसान हो रहा है। तो ये जो सोच को यूथ भी कैसे समझें, और यूथ आगे ये जो सोच को, जो हमारा जो व्यवस्था है, हमारा भी मार्केट है खुद का, जो खुद का जो व्यवस्था है, मार्केट का मतलब है जो सब कुछ नुकसान करके पैसा दे के, पैसा के ऊपर हम नहीं सोचते। मार्केट हमारा खुद का भी एक व्यवस्था है, जो उस जो जिंदा जो व्यवस्था, जो जान है, जो व्यवस्था है ऊपर, उस जो व्यवस्था को कैसे बचा के रखेंगे। तो वो सारे चीज़ें हम कोशिश करते हैं कि यूथ के साथ कैसे इसको बचा कर रखेंगे। अगर ये जंगल, ज़मीन, परंपरा बीज, ये व्यवस्था, शिक्षा, ये सब अगर नहीं जुड़ता है तो हमारा जो व्यवस्था नहीं होता है। तो इसको कैसे हम बचाना चाहते हैं, तो इसके ऊपर हम सोचना चाहते हैं। और उम्मीद है कि यहाँ देश से बहुत राज्यों से आए हैं और कुछ हमको दिशा दिखाने के लिए कभी हम आपको मदद चाहेंगे, तो आप हमारी ज़रूरत है। तो इतना ही, मेरा नमस्ते।
धन्यवाद। जगन्नाथ जी, आप आगे बढ़िए, हम आपके साथ हैं। तो I'll do, is there a need for an English translation for the interpreters to translate into other languages? I'll quickly do it. Jagannath Maji ji talked about this concept of kutumb, that they are all a family which exists in the Kond Adivasi communities like it does in many Adivasi communities. And this idea of a family is not just about human beings, is not just about blood relations. It is about the birds, the rivers, the mountains, the forests, the departed ancestors whose spirits are still with them, and human beings. So their concept of a family is a much larger concept, and the Kutum works together as a family. So he is talking about a communitarian worldview that they have. But today, it looks like human beings want to be all alone on this planet and everything else is getting pushed out. He also talked about how the current kind of food production is causing a lot of damage. It's about monocropping and monocultures, whereas our food systems used to be Sampurna food systems. They used to be holistic, which included all aspects. And the problem lies at many levels. He talked about how education is going wrong, how that's one of the key factors why things are changing for the worse as far as Adivasis are concerned. He talked about forests and the very imagination of forests that the state and the market forces bring, that it is not, for them it's one type of a plant or a species, whereas for us forests include many, many, many species and spirits. He also talked about how there is a deep continuum, a deep linkage between their culture, their farming, their forests, and the community. And he said that if you break even one part of that continuum, you alter the farming, then something else will happen to the forest and so on, that each of these get affected. He talked about how markets are playing havoc and how monetization, everything valuated only in money terms and commodification, is causing a lot of problems. And he talked about how they had a maska system, a barter system of supporting each other, exchanging both resources and other things with each other. And he said that unless we fall back on all these things, Adivasi way of living and their lives cannot be saved. Please do step forward to support Adivasis in their imagination and their worldview of how they should be. And he says, if you need our help, we are also there for you. Thanks. I now invite Vegi Mahesh ji from Anakapalli district of Andhra Pradesh, who's a tenant farmer himself, and he will talk about issues of tenant farming as he faces them.
అందరికీ నమస్కారములు. మాకు ఎకరాల పొలం ఉంది. 4 ఎకరాలు కౌలుకి తీసుకున్నాం. 4 ఎకరాలకి ఎకరాకి 10,000 చెప్పుని కౌలుకి 4 ఎకరాలకి 40,000 ఇస్తున్నాం. కానీ పంట నష్టపరిహారం మాకు ఏమీ రావట్లేదు. అది భూమి యజమానులకు వెళ్ళిపోతుంది. కానీ మేము రుణములు కూడా బ్యాంక్ నుంచి మాకేమీ రావట్లేదు. ఆ రుణాలు బయట నుంచి తెచ్చుకుంటూ ₹2, ₹3 వడ్డీలు మేము తీసుకుంటున్నాం. దానివల్ల కొద్దిగా మేము ఇబ్బంది పడుతున్నాము. అలానే మా కౌలు రైతుగా గుర్తింపు కార్డు ఏమీ ఉండట్లేదు. ధన్యవాదములు.
Shall I translate? Okay. So this is Vegi Mahesh. He is from a village called Gavarapalam in Anakapalli district of Andhra Pradesh. So he is basically telling about his experience, what he and his family are facing as tenant farmers. Their family has an own land of about 1.5 acres, but that is not sufficient to earn sufficient income to support the family. So they are taking another 4 acres of land on lease and from some other landowner in that village. And but when they take the land on lease, they have to pay another extra 10,000 rupees per acre as a lease amount. And this amount has to be paid regardless of whether they get a good crop or whether the crop fails or any such thing. So they have to definitely pay this 10,000 rupees. And he was also describing how when they lose their crop, like it happened last year, when they lost the crop due to floods, the compensation for that also goes into the owner's account. And the owner is not sharing it with them. And the government is also not recognizing the tenant farmers or giving them the recognition cards. And though they try to apply, the landowner refuses to put his signature on the application form. Therefore, they are not getting any recognition as tenant farmers. And all the schemes, whether it's disaster compensation or any other schemes, all go into the to the owner and not to the tenant farmer. So he has to borrow money outside at a high rate of interest and is getting into debt. He ended by saying that the government should make sure that all the tenant farmers should get recognition as farmers.
మహేష్ గారు తెలుగులో చెప్పట్లేదు కానీ హిందీలోనే. మహేష్ గారు ఆప్ ఆగే బఢో.
हम आपके साथ हैं.
మహేష్ గారు ఆప్ ఆగే బఢో.
हम आपके साथ हैं. అంటే మీ వెనక మేము ఉన్నాము అని.
Thank you, Kiran, for the translation. So the next question that we have for one of our speakers, so the way we thought we will run this session is that the issues are vast and deep, and discussions have to happen both by framing the problem and also talking about solutions. So, and we have luckily at least 2 speakers each who can delve on a particular issue. So we will start with the question of invisibilized women farmers and the problem statement framing part. May I request Srimati Sharada Gopal ji to help us frame the issues here. And the question is, how big is the segment that we are talking about women farmers, and why are they being invisibilized according to you?
Yes.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ನಾನು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದೆ ಮಹಾರಾಷ್ಟ್ರದಿಂದ ಬಂದಂಥ ಅವರು ಕಬ್ಬು ಒಂದು ಆದಿವಾಸಿ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಫಾರ್ಮರು ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಕಬ್ಬು ಕಟಾವು ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಅವರು ಇಡೀ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲೂ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಗುತ್ತಿಗೆ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಕಬ್ಬು ಕಟಾವಿಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥ ಯಾರು ಕಣ್ಣಿಗೂ ಬೀಳದಂಥ ರೈತ ಮಹಿಳೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇನ್ನು ಆಂಧ್ರ ಪ್ರದೇಶ ಮತ್ತು ತೆಲಂಗಾಣದಿಂದ ಬಂದಂಥ ಆದಿವಾಸಿ ರೈತರುಗಳಿಗೂ ಯಾರು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಣ್ಣಿಗೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಮೇನ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರೀಮ್ ಅಂತ ಏನು ಕರಿತೀವಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಣ್ಣಿಗೆ ಕಾಣದಂಥ ಫಾರ್ಮರ್ಸ್ ಇವರು. ಇದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಒಬ್ಬರಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅವರು ದಲಿತ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಫಾರ್ಮರ್ಸು. ನನಗೆ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ ನಾನು ಕರ್ಕೊಂಬರ್ತಿದ್ದೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ. ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಸುಮಾರು 60 ವರ್ಷದ ಹಿಂದೆಯೇ ಭೂಮಿಯನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದೆ ಸರ್ಕಾರ, ಆದರೆ ಇನ್ನೂವರೆಗೆ ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಸರಲ್ಲಿ ಭೂಮಿಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ. ಯಾವ ಕ್ಷಣದಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಅವರನ್ನು ಹೊರಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ಬೋದು. ನಮ್ಮ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ 1961ರಲ್ಲೇ ಭೂಮಿ ಹಂಚಿಕೆ ಕಾಯ್ದೆ ಬಂತು. ಕಾಯ್ದೆ ಬಂದಾಗ ಯಾವಾಗ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಭೂಮಿಯನ್ನು ಹಂಚ್ತದೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ 50% ಅರ್ಧದಷ್ಟು ಭೂಮಿಯನ್ನು ದಲಿತರ ಕುಟುಂಬಗಳಿಗೆ ಹಂಚಬೇಕು ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ಬಂದಿತ್ತು. ಆ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ, ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಬೆಳಗಾವಿ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಯ ಹುಕ್ಕೇರಿ ತಾಲೂಕಿಂದ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆಗೆ, ಅದು ಧಾರವಾಡ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಯ ಖಾನಾಪುರ ತಾಲೂಕಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಧಾರವಾಡ ತಾಲೂಕಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಂಥಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಟೆನೆಂಟ್ ಫಾರ್ಮಿಂಗ್ ಸೊಸೈಟಿ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಜನರನ್ನು ಎತ್ತಂಗಡಿ ಮಾಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಅನೇಕ ಅಣೆಕಟ್ಟುಗಳಾದಾಗ ಅವರನ್ನು ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಪುನರ್ವಸತಿಗಾಗಿ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಿಡ್ಕಲ್ ಡ್ಯಾಮ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನೀವು ಕೇಳಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಕೂಡ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರು ಸುಮಾರು 40-50 ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಭೂಮಿಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಟೆನೆಂಟ್ ಫಾರ್ಮಿಂಗ್ ಸೊಸೈಟಿ ತಂತಾನೆ ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಉಚ್ಚ ವರ್ಗದವರು ಮೇಲ್ವರ್ಗದವರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದವರು. ಇವತ್ತು ಅದು ಫಾರ್ಮಿಂಗ್ ಸೊಸೈಟಿನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸೊಸೈಟಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ಕೂಡಲೇ ಯಾರ್ಯಾರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರು, ಮೆಂಬರ್ಸ್ ಯಾರ್ಯಾರಿದ್ರು ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಸರಿಗೆ ಭೂಮಿ ಆಗಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು ಕಾನೂನು ಪ್ರಕಾರ, ಆದರೆ ಆಗೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ರೈತರು ಕೂಡ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಲೆಕ್ಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇವತ್ತದು ಸರ್ಕಾರಿ ಭೂಮಿ ಅಂತ ಕರೆಸ್ಕೋತದೆ. ಯಾವ ಭೂಮಿ ಮೇಲೆ ಇವರು 50 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಭೂಮಿ ಉಳ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಆ ಭೂಮಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಭೂಮಿ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆ ಭೂಮಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರಿ ಭೂಮಿ. ಯಾವತ್ತು ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಭೂಮಿಯಿಂದ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಹೊರಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ಬೋದು. ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಅವರು ಇನ್ವಿಸಿಬಲ್ ಅಥವಾ ಅದೃಶ್ಯ ರೈತರು. ಸೊ ಇಂಥ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು ಯಾಕೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇವೆ? ಇದು ನಾವು ರೈತರಲ್ಲಿ, ಮಹಿಳಾ ರೈತರ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲೂ ಇದನ್ನು ಕಾಣ್ತೀವಿ, ಆದಿವಾಸಿ ರೈತರ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲೂ ಇದನ್ನು ಕಾಣ್ತೀವಿ, ಮತ್ತು ದಲಿತ ರೈತರ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲೂ ಇದು ಕಾಣ್ತೀವಿ. ಕಾನೂನುಗಳು ಬಹಳ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿವೆ ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ, ಒಂದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಒಂದು ಉತ್ತಮ ಕಾನೂನು. ಇವತ್ತೆಲ್ಲ ಕಾನೂನುಗಳನ್ನು ಕಿತ್ತಾಕ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅದು ಬೇರೆ ವಿಷಯ. ಆದರೆ ಮೂಲತಃ ಕಾನೂನುಗಳು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿವೆ. ಅದು ಕಾನೂನುಗಳು ಜಾರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬರದೇ ಇದ್ದಂಗೆ ಉಚ್ಚ ವರ್ಗದವರು ನೋಡ್ಕೋತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಆಡಳಿತ ವರ್ಗ ನೋಡ್ಕೋತಾ ಇದೆ. ಅವರು ಕೈ ಮೇಲಾಯಿಸಿ ಈ ದಲಿತರಿಗೆ, ಈ ಮಹಿಳೆಯರಿಗೆ ಭೂಮಿ ಸಿಗದೇ ಇದ್ದಂಗೆ ನೋಡ್ಕೋತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆಗಲೇ ಕವಿತಾ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದರು, ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ರೈತ ನೀತಿ ಅಂತ ಬಂದಿದೆ, 2007 ಬಂತು. ರೈತ ನೀತಿ ಅಂತ ಬಂದಿದ್ದರು. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಭೂಮಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೆಲಸಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡುವವರಿಗೂ ರೈತರು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಎಷ್ಟು ದುರದೃಷ್ಟಕರ ಅಂದರೆ, ನೀವು ಯಾವ ಜಿಲ್ಲಾಧಿಕಾರಿ ಹತ್ರನೂ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಕೇಳಿ, ಅವರಿಗೆ ಈ ನೀತಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೇ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ನಾವು 2015ರಿಂದ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಕಿಸಾನ್ ಮಕಾಮ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬೆಳಗಾವಿ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಜಿಲ್ಲಾಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳ ಹತ್ರಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಂಥ ಒಂದು ನೀತಿ ಇರೋದು. ಅದ ನಂತರ 2015ರಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ನೀತಿ ಬರ್ತದೆ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ತದೆ, ಹಳ್ಳಿಗಳಿರುವಂಥ ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಕ್ಕಳದ್ದೇ ಒಂದು ದಿನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತೇಳಿ. ಅಕ್ಟೋಬರ್ 15 ರೈತ ಮಹಿಳಾ ದಿನ ಅಂತ ಘೋಷಣೆ ಮಾಡಿದರು. ಎಷ್ಟು ವಿಚಿತ್ರ ಅಂದರೆ, ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಇದು ಮಹಿಳಾ ರೈತ ದಿನನೋ ಅಥವಾ ಗ್ರಾಮೀಣ ರೈತ ದಿನನೋ ಅಂತ, ಗ್ರಾಮೀಣ ಮಹಿಳಾ ದಿನನೋ ಅಂತ. ಒಬ್ಬರು ಗ್ರಾಮೀಣ ಮಹಿಳಾ ದಿನ ಅಂತ ಆಚರಿಸ್ತಾರೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಬರು ಮಹಿಳಾ ರೈತ ದಿನ ಅಂತ ಆಚರಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಅವರಿಗೆ ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಷನ್ನು. ಸರಿ, ನೀವು ಮಹಿಳಾ ರೈತ ದಿನ ಅಂತ ಆಚರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ, ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ಒಂದು ಗುರುತು ಕೊಡಿ ನಮಗೆ. ಇವತ್ತು ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಕಿಸಾನ್ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಅಂತ ಸಿಗ್ತದೆ. ಅವರು ರೈತ ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ಅವರ RTCಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಸರು ಎಂಟ್ರಿ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪಾಲಿಸಿ ಇದೆ, 2007ರಲ್ಲೇ ಬಂದಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತದೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಭೂಮಿ ಹಂಚಿಕೆ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಗಂಡಸರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಹೆಸರು ಕೂಡ ಕಂಪಲ್ಸರಿ ಎಂಟ್ರಿ ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅಂಥೇಳಿ. ಇದು ಕೂಡ ಯಾವ ಜಿಲ್ಲಾಧಿಕಾರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಇದೆಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀರಿ, ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಸಿಕ್ತೀರಿ ನಿಮಗಿದು ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಇಷ್ಟು ಅಂದರೆ ಇದು ಎಲ್ಲದರ ಹಿಂದೆ ಏನಿದೆ? ಒಂದೇ ತತ್ವ ಇದೆ. ಒಂದು, ರೈತರು ಅಂದರೆ ಗಂಡಸರು, ಪುರುಷರು, ಭೂಮಿಗೆ ಒಡೆಯಾಗಿರುವಂಥವನು ಪುರುಷ ಮಾತ್ರ, ಅದರಿಂದ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳ ಹೆಸರು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೋ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ ಮನೋಭಾವ ಏನಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಇದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆ ಕಾಣ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ಆರ್ ಟಿ ಸಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವಳ ಹೆಸರಿಲ್ಲ, ಆರ್ ಟಿ ಸಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಸರಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, ಅವಳಿಗೆ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಕಿಸಾನ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಸಿಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಕಿಸಾನ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಯಾಕಪ್ಪ ಬೇಕು? ಕಿಸಾನ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿದ್ದು ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಲೋನ್ ತಗೊಳ್ಳೋಕ್ಕೆ, ನಿಮಗೆ ಕೃಷಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ, ಬೀಜ ಖರೀದಿಗೆ, ಗೊಬ್ಬರಕ್ಕಾಗಿ, ಕೂಲಿಗ ಕೆಲಸಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಮಗೆ ಹಣ ಬೇಕು. ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ತರಬೇಕು? ಸೊ ಕಿಸಾನ್ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಕೊಡಿ ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ಹೋಗಿ ಕೇಳಿದರೆ, ಗಂಡನ ಹೆಸರಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಲ್ಲ, ನಿಮಗೆ ಯಾಕೆ? ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಇವಳ ಹೆಸರು ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ಸಾಲ ಸಿಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಸಿಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ಕೂಡಲೇ ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ಕೂಡಲೇ ಮುಂದೆ ತರಬೇತಿ ವಿಷಯ ತಗೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಯಾವುದೇ ತರಬೇತಿ ಕರೆದು ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮಹಿಳೆಯರನ್ನು ಕರೆಯೋದು, ಅದು ಮಹಿಳೆಯರನ್ನು ಕರಿಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ ನೀತಿ ಇರೋದರಿಂದ ಕರಿತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಹೊರತು ಮಹಿಳೆಯರನ್ನು ತರಬೇತಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಕರೆಯೋದು ತುಂಬ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದೆ. ಕೊನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಉತ್ಪಾದನೆಯ ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆಗೆ ಹೋಗಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅವಳಿಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅವಕಾಶ ಇದೆ? ತಾನು ಬೆಳೆದಿದ್ದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಂಥ ಮಹಿಳಾ ರೈತರನ್ನೇ ಕೇಳಿದ್ವಿ, ನೀವು ಮಹಿಳಾ ರೈತರಿದ್ದೀರಿ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ನೀವು ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ತೀರಾ ಅಂತ. ಬುಟ್ಟಿ ತುಂಬ ಬದನೆಕಾಯಿನೋ ಬೆಂಡೆಕಾಯಿನೋ ಸೊಪ್ಪು ಬೆಳೆದಿದ್ದಿದ್ರೆ ಊರಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾರಾಟ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬರ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಇದೆ. ತಾಲೂಕಾ ಮಟ್ಟದ ಸಂತೆಗೆ ಹೋಗಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಗಂಡಸರು ಹೋಗಬೇಕು. ಯಾರು ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ರೇಟ್ಗಳನ್ನು? ಎಲ್ಲ ಗಂಡಸರೇ ರೀ. ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂಥ ಏಜೆಂಟ್ರುಗಳು ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವು ಆ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗೆ ಬರ್ತೀವಿ, ನಾವು ಬೆಳೆಯುವಂಥ ಆಹಾರ ಉತ್ಪಾದನೆಯ ಬೆಲೆಯನ್ನು ನಿರ್ಧರಿಸುವವರು ಯಾರು ಅಂಥೇಳಿ. ಸೊ ಈ ಮಹಿಳೆಯರು ನಮ್ಮ ಗ್ರಾಮೀಣ ಜನರಲ್ಲಿ 65% ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ ಹೊಲಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋದು. ಯಾವ ಹೊತ್ತಿಗೆ ನೀವು ಹೊಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಕಾಣೋರು ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳು. ಆ್ಯಕ್ಚುಲಿ ವಿಸಿಬಲ್ ಇವರು, ಆದರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ದಾಖಲೆಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಅವರು ಇಲ್ಲವೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಇದು ಇವತ್ತು ಒಂದು ಕಿಸಾನ್ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಸಿಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಲೋನ್ ಸಿಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಕೆಲವು ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ನಮಗೆ ಇದು ಸ್ವಂತ ಅನುಭವ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳ ಗುಂಪು ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಸಾಲಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಹೋಯಿತು, ಸಾಲ ಕೊಡಿ ನಮಗೆ ಅಂಥೇಳಿ. ಏನಾದರೂ ಸಾಲ ಹೇಗೆ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ? ಜಾಮೀನು ಬೇಕು. ಏನಿದೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹೆಸರಲ್ಲಿ? ಏನೂ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇವತ್ತು ನನಗೆ ಒಂದು ಗುರುತಿದೆ, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ನನಗೆ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಇದೆ. ನನಗೆ ಭೂಮಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, ನನಗೆ ಭೂಮಿ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಇದೆ. ಆ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣದಿಂದ ನಾನೇನು ನನ್ನ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ, ಅದರಿಂದ ನನಗೆ ಗುರುತಿದೆ. ಆದರೆ ಈ ಮಹಿಳೆಯರೇನಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಹಳ್ಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ದುಡಿತಾ ಇರುವಂಥವರು, ಬೆಳಗಿಂದ ಸಂಜೆ ತನಕ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ದುಡಿಯೋದು ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಏನೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಈ ಮಹಿಳೆಯರಿಗೆ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಯಾಕೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಭೂಮಿ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅವ್ರ ತಂದೆ ಹೆಸರಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಭೂಮಿ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಗುರುತಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಇವತ್ತು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಗುರುತು ಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬೇಕು, ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಭೂಮಿ ಬೇಕು. ಅವರಿಗೆ ಸಾಲ ಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಸರಲ್ಲಿ ಭೂಮಿ ಇರಬೇಕು. ಅವ್ರ ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರ ಗುರುತು ಇರಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಭೂಮಿ ಬೇಕು. ಸೊ ನಾವು ಮೊನ್ನೆಯಿಂದ ಭೂಮಿಯ, ಕೃಷಿಯ ಅನೇಕ ಸಂಕಟಗಳನ್ನು ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ಏನು ವಾತಾವರಣ ಬದಲಾವಣೆಯಿಂದ ಏನು ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ವಿ ನಾವು. ಆದರೆ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಬಾಯಿಂದ ಕೂಡ ಮಹಿಳೆಯರ ಹೆಸರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಭೂಮಿ ಇಲ್ಲದೇ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳಾಗ್ತಾ ಇವೆ. ಆದರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಭಾರವನ್ನು ಮಹಿಳೆ ಹೊರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಳೆ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ ಮಾತು ಮಾತ್ರ ಯಾವ ಪರಿಣಿತರ ಬಾಯಲ್ಲೂ ನಾನು ಕೇಳಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದು ನನಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಸಂಕಟವನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಈಗಾದರೂ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ಗುರುತಿಸೋಣ, ಮಹಿಳೆಯರ ಹೆಸರಲ್ಲಿ ಭೂಮಿಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾದ ಧ್ವನಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
You speak English, of course, and I don't speak Kannada, of course, but I'll take the liberty of quickly translating in English what Sharda Gopal had said. She talked about how there are many progressive legislations in this country, but how implementation is extremely poor, and that is because the powerful always come in the way of implementation of even those progressive legislations. She talked about how the fact that a national policy for farmers has a progressive understanding of who farmers are including farm workers, landless farm workers being farmers. But nobody knows that India has a national policy for farmers. And if you go into rural India, they absolutely have no knowledge about it. She talked about the fact that how recently on October 15th, on a day when we should have celebrated the invaluable contribution of women farmers, it is the International Rural Women's Day, nobody was willing to mark the day as a Women Farmers' Day. And she brought it down to the fact that women are not identified and recognized as farmers. She said that when you go around villages, you will find women working day in and day out. All around visually, you can see women working in the fields and everywhere, but on the documents, you don't find women at all. Their names are not there in any official document. She talked about the fact that land rights don't exist for women farmers. Kisan credit cards, you really don't know who are those women, how many women have Kisan credit cards. No loans coming to women farmers. No trainings and no capacity building investments happening on women farmers. And then when you go to the marketing end, no support to women farmers when they want to market something. At the most, they can market something if they grow perishables within their village. There are various issues that confront them, both from society as well from the state. And she also talked about the fact that lack of education, even if there's lack of land rights, is one other thing that's coming in the way of women farmers being recognized. And they are the ones who are actually working and contributing to food production. We have to give them identity and recognition to begin with. This, I think, is, Sharda, I hope I've, yeah. We'll move to...
Like the women farmers who have been invisibilized in this country, the other section that when in mainstream discourses happen, we forget is that of Adivasi farmers. And in fact, we don't even consider them as farmers in the mainstream is what one sees. They're mostly, the image is that of an hunter-gatherer, but while we forget the fact that if you look at the land, the area of land being tilled in this country, there's a huge section of Adivasi farmers who are involved in it. And we have Professor Jadegowda with us. He's a professor at the Forestry College in Ponnambet in Coorg, and himself from Adivasi community, the Sholiga community in Karnataka. We would like to hear from you about the problems that Adivasi farmers face, and especially in the context of the FRA which has come in. How has that impacted their lives and farming? Thank you.
My name is Dr. Jadegowda. I belong to Soliga tribal community. ನಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು ಸೋಲಿಗರು ಅಂತ ಬಿಳಿಗಿರಿ ರಂಗನ ಬೆಟ್ಟದ ಕಡೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. Yeah.
Just one second, Dr. Jadegowda. Translations are happening on your phones, and whichever speaker can stick to English, that would be useful. I know that you're a Kannadi.
Thank you. Okay, ಈಗಾಗಲೇ I'm happy that this national level Kisan Swaraj Sammelan is happening for the last 3 days. Since I belong to a tribal, I myself a Soliga tribal from Biligiri Rangan Hills. You know, in India we have around 10% tribal population of the out of total population. And in Karnataka we are around 7%, but the real tribals are hardly 1%. Nearly out of 45 lakh tribal people in Karnataka, only less than 6 lakh people are real tribals in the forest. So the forest are, where there is actually, there are a lot of problems. In fact, I have done my MSc work on tribal cropping systems in BR Hills. I have done my UG and PG and PhD in Agricultural University, Bangalore. I have been educated by Dr. Sudarshan, a well-known social worker. He works for the tribal implement and one of the national award winners. And so he gathered 6 children in the forest. When he came in 1979, he came to BR Hills and he made a small hut. I was one of the boys out of 6. So he first started education, health, community development, now into sustainable agriculture. So our life is, we have been living the forest. Whenever an outsider went into a forest, we ran into the forest and hide ourselves. That was the situation. And we were doing shifting agriculture at that time. Shifting agriculture and also collection of minor forest products. 50% of our income is through collection of minor forest products, and 50% of our income is through agriculture, traditional agriculture. Actually, there are so many issues are there, in now I have been taught almost 15 years about how to grow crops in applying chemical fertilizers in agricultural universities. But from my childhood, I have been seeing that my mother and my people are doing natural farming, organic farming, which are so free from the chemicals, bad chemicals, which are so good, and they are living harmony with nature, actually. Even my MSc work also on the organic farming of the tribal cropping systems. So our tribal cropping system is so good. We follow two cropping systems, mixed cropping and multi-storied cropping, which are so good for soil health as well as the human health and many ecological health. So we maintain a big so many diversity of millets, pulses, oil seeds, and so many other diversity which are good for our health. And tribal health was really, they were taking balanced nutrition earlier. Now because of the forest policy, the forest department is trying to evict the tribal from outside the area, from the tribal area, from the forest to outside area. So their rights and the food sovereignty is actually stripped by these policies. And also the monoculture. The agriculture department is promoting a lot of though I am a professor at the College of Forestry, done my PhD in agriculture, but the way the government is approaching, this department is not actually telling the people to follow the traditional agriculture and mixed cropping. They only promote this monoculture system, which is not good for soil health as well as human beings. Now many of tribals are now suffering from malnutrition. That is another issue. And also many tribals earlier, they were very innocent. They had three important values. One is living simple living harmony with nature, and sharing system. So we had a barter system earlier. Whatever we grow, ragi or millets, anything, we tend to share with others. And the equal, like if they hunt animal, 1 kg of animal equal to 1 kg of grain. That was the harmony we had earlier. But unfortunately, due to economic conditions of the present scenario, now people are suffering from malnutrition, especially anemic is happening rampant over there. So Dr. Sudarshan and the NGO is working, Vivekananda Girijana Kalyanana Kendra is working with the support of Sahaja Samruddha Foundation, Prasad Virdaraidali, Nama Krishna Prasad. We had a organic farmers group over there. We had collected around so many types of indigenous varieties of ragi and millets, which are very good for health. In fact, we celebrated a festival known as Roti Abba, Ragi Abba, festival of rice, ragi, or bread festival. That is our tradition. Unfortunately, because of the new technologies, interventions, and policies, we are actually forgetting our culture. This particular forum is doing wonderful work, and I'm really happy about this. And because I have been teaching about this modern agriculture, which is not good for health, everything, for environment, everything is not good for. But unfortunately, because I am getting, I don't know, believe or not, my professors are getting around 2,50,000 rupees. I'm getting around 2,50,000 rupees per month. I don't know why they are paying so much. I can't understand, because among Soliga tribal community, we are not grabbing money for one person or something like that. We have been sharing our systems. That's what I share. Whatever I earn money, I share to the communities for higher education. And I don't believe where there is equity is not happening. This is what is a really irrational thing government is doing. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಬ್ಬರಿಗೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಒಬ್ಬರೇ ಶ್ರೀಮಂತರ ಆಗಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಟ್ರೈ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಏನು ಪ್ರಯೋಜನ ಇದೆ? ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ we have to live harmony with nature. So these are the things which I observed, and I always promote organic farming, traditional agriculture, which is very good for future. I've been to 10 countries. Wherever I go, I prefer to be vegetarian, and I used to eat always organic food, which is so good. So organic food, traditional medicine, these are it's our heritage. We should conserve them. So ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. With respect to Forest Rights Act, in Karnataka, that reservation is not happening for the real tribals. There are 12 ethnic communities in forest tribes in Karnataka. Even the real tribals are not getting reservation. They have been marginalized. See, I have got assistant professors, I got more than 80%. So I got with the UGC net and all, I got the assistant professorship. So that way the reservation is not happening. And the same thing in Forest Rights Act, the community rights is not given to many people. The individual rights are given to some people, but still the communities, Soliga Abhiruddhi Sanghas in Karnataka and Dr. Sudarshan, many NGOs are now working for the rights for tribals, as well as the conservation, traditional medicine system, traditional agriculture, which are the things for the future generations. So this is what I don't want to talk too much. Hagagi, I am extremely happy to thankful to our Madam Kavita Madam and the organizers for me to share my few thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'll move to Bhanuja, and her work is around a whole gamut of issues, but part of what she does is to address the issue of tenant farmers in Andhra Pradesh, and along with a group of single women, she herself is a tenant farmer. She has leased in land, and there is group farming that happens of women farmers, that too single women farmers. Bhanuja garu, కౌలు రైతులది అసలు సమస్య ఏంటి? వాళ్ళు ఎందుకు అదృశ్యం అయిపోయారు? వాళ్ళు కూడా ఒక అదృశ్య రైతులని మనం ఎందుకు అంటున్నాము? I asked her what are the issues of tenant farmers and how do they get invisibilized?
ఓకే, అందరికీ నమస్కారం. టెనెంట్ ఫార్మర్స్ అదృశ్యం అయిపోలేదు. టెనెంట్ ఫార్మర్స్ ఎవరైతే ఉన్నారో వాళ్ళు భూమి మీద సాగు చేస్తూ ఉన్నారు. పేపర్ మీద లేదు, వాళ్ళకి రావాల్సిన ఎంటైటిల్మెంట్ ఏమైతే ఉన్నాయో యాజ్ ఏ టెనెంట్ ఫార్మర్స్గా గుర్తింపు అనేది లేదు. అది గుర్తింపు ఇవ్వాలనేది పేపర్లో, చట్టాల్లో, జియోస్లో ఉంది. అయితే ముఖ్యంగా టెనెంట్ ఫార్మర్స్కు ఉన్న సమస్యలు చాలా టెనెంట్ ఫార్మర్స్ ఉన్నారని తెలంగాణ, ఏపీ అన్ని రైతు సంఘాలు దీని మీద పెద్ద ఎత్తున పోరాటాలు చేసి సర్క్యులర్స్, జియోస్ ఏమైనా వచ్చినా కూడా వాటిలో ఉన్న విషయాలు ఇంప్లిమెంటేషన్లో చేసే విధానంలో చాలా గ్యాప్స్ ఉన్నాయి. అయితే మనం 2011లో ఎల్ఈసి కార్డ్స్ ఇచ్చినప్పుడు కూడా అది దాంట్లో ఉన్న విషయాలు అప్పుడు వాటికంటే ఇంకా మెరుగ్గా ఉండాలని రైతు స్వరాజ్ వేదిక, మకాం చాలాసార్లు దీని మీద వేరే విధమైన గ్రామీణ స్థాయిలో ఎట్లాంటి సమస్యలు ఉన్నాయని బయటకు తీసి మాట్లాడిన తర్వాత కూడా 2009లో కూడా సిసిఆర్సి కార్డులు అనేది అనౌన్స్ చేయడం జరిగింది. దానికి సంబంధించింది కూడా చాలా చట్టం చేసే విధంగా కూడా ఏపీలో చాలా హర్షించదగ్గ విషయాలు కూడా పేపర్ మీద వచ్చాయి. అంటే ఒక చట్టం రూపంలో కానీ సర్క్యులర్ రూపంలో కానీ. అంటే 2011లో వచ్చినప్పుడు ఏంటంటే ఎల్ఈసి కార్డులు మేము దాని మీద కూడా అప్పుడు రైతు స్వరాజ్ వేదిక నుండి స్టడీ చేసినప్పుడు కొంత ఏరియాలో అందరికీ కూడా చాలా లక్షల దీంట్లో ఎల్ఈసి కార్డులు ఇచ్చారు. ఇంత బాగా ఇస్తున్నారు ఏంటని వెళ్ళినప్పుడు ఎవరికైతే రైతులకు 50 ఎకరాల నుండి 100 ఎకరాలు అట్లున్నాయో భార్య పేరు మీద, కొడుకు పేరు మీద, కజన్ బ్రదర్స్ పేరు మీద విపరీతంగా ఇచ్చారు. అప్పట్లో ఏంటంటే గుంటూరులో ఒక మీటింగ్ చేసినప్పుడు రాజశేఖర్ గారు మన ప్రిన్సిపల్ సెక్రటరీ అగ్రికల్చర్ ఉన్నారు. ఆయన దృష్టికి గ్రామీణ స్థాయిలో ఉన్నవన్నీ కూడా తీసుకెళ్ళి మాట్లాడడం జరిగింది. అప్పుడు కొంత ఆ సమస్య బయటకు వచ్చింది. రెండో విషయం ఏంటంటే సిసిఆర్సి కార్డులో కూడా చాలా మటుకు చాలా బాగా ఉందని మన ఆర్ఎస్వి నుండే పాంప్లెట్స్ తయారు చేయడము, దాంట్లో ఉన్న విషయాలు గవర్నమెంటే కూర్చోబెట్టి మాట్లాడి చాలా ఫీడ్బ్యాక్ తీసుకొని దీన్ని పెద్ద ఎత్తున ప్రచారం చేయాలి. ఏదైతే ఖరీఫ్ రబీలో 11 monthsకు ఏమైతే మనం సిసిఆర్సి కార్డులు ఇస్తున్నామో వాటికి సంబంధించి ప్రచారం జరగాలి. గ్రామ సభలు పెట్టి రైతుకు, కౌలు రైతుకు ఇద్దరికి కూడా అవగాహన కార్యక్రమాలు పెట్టించాలి. సిసిఆర్సి కార్డులు ఇచ్చే విధంగా ఎన్ని ఇవ్వాలి ఒక్కొక్క జిల్లాలో అనేది టార్గెట్లు కూడా పెట్టారు. ఇది చాలా అద్భుతంగా అవుతుందని అందరూ అనుకోవడం జరిగింది. కానీ వాటికి సంబంధించి ఆ ఇంప్లిమెంటేషన్లో వెళ్ళినప్పుడు గ్రామ సభల్లో కానీ ఇంకోటి కానీ ఏమవుతుందంటే దాంట్లో ఉన్న లోపం ఏముంది, భూ యజమాని ఒప్పుకుంటేనే సిసిఆర్సి కార్డు అనేది కౌలు రైతులకు రావాలి. భూ యజమాని ఒప్పుకుంటామంటే ఎట్లుందంటే ఇది గ్రామాల్లో ఎంత అవగాహన చేసినా భూ యజమానిని ఒప్పించాల్సిన అవసరం ఉన్నా కూడా అది ఒప్పుకునే పరిస్థితి లేదు. కానీ ఆ బాధ్యత కూడా ఎవరికి ఇచ్చారు, అది తయారు చేసినప్పుడు కూడా. ఇప్పుడు వాలంటరీ సిస్టము ఏపీలో, సచివాలయం సిస్టము, ఆర్బీకే రైతు భరోసా కేంద్రాలు, రైతులు ఎక్కడైతే ఉన్నారో అక్కడే అన్ని చోట్ల సర్వీస్ చేయడానికి దాదాపు 24 మంది గవర్నమెంట్ సర్వీసెస్ ఇవ్వడానికి కూడా ఉన్నారు. వాళ్ళ రెస్పాన్సిబిలిటీ, రైతును ఒప్పించేది కూడా వాళ్ళ రెస్పాన్సిబిలిటీ అని చాలా చక్కగా రాయడం జరిగింది. కానీ ఎవరు అక్కడ బాధ్యత తీసుకునే పరిస్థితి లేదు. కౌలు రైతు సిసిఆర్సి కార్డు ఇవ్వడానికి భూ యజమానిని ఒప్పించాలి అనేది ఏమైతే ఉన్నారో అది ఒక పెద్ద సమస్యగా, ఎల్ఈసి కార్డు కంటే పెద్ద సమస్యగా మారింది. గతంలోనే ఎల్ఈసి కార్డు ఇచ్చినప్పుడు ఏదో కొంతమంది అన్న ఇచ్చినప్పుడు బ్యాంక్ లోనికి వెళ్ళడమో లేదంటే దాని మీద ఏదన్నా ఇన్పుట్స్ మనము పెట్టినప్పుడు నష్టపరిహారం జరిగినప్పుడు ఇట్లాంటివి వచ్చే అవకాశం ఉండేది. వీటిలో చాలా చక్కగా చట్టం చేస్తూ కూడా భూ యజమానికి ఎప్పుడైతే దాని మీద ఒపీనియన్ తీసుకోవాలనేది వచ్చిందో అది చాలా ప్రాబ్లమాటిక్గా అయిందనేది రీసెంట్గా చేసిన ఆర్ఎస్వి చేసిన స్టడీలో కూడా వచ్చిన విషయాలు. అయితే ముఖ్యంగా కౌలు రైతుకున్న సమస్యను మనము చాలా లోతుగా వెళ్తే 1 ఎకరం ఉన్నవాళ్ళు, 2 ఎకరాలు ఉన్నవాళ్ళు కూడా ఒక 7-8 ఎకరాలు కూడా కౌలుకు తీసుకొని చేసే అట్లా అలవాటు మన రైతులకు ఉంది. ఎందుకంటే 1-2 ఎకరాల్లో వర్షాధార పంటలు పండించలేరు. అదే నీటాధారదైతే విపరీతమైన కౌలు రైతులు చాలా, అంటే కోస్టలాంధ్ర అట్లా తీసుకున్నప్పుడు చాలా వేల రూపాయలు ఉంది. కొంత ప్లెయిన్ ఏరియాలో రాయలసీమ ప్రాంతం ఇట్లా తీసుకున్నప్పుడు 10,000 నుండి 20,000 వరకు ఉంది. కౌలు రైతు తీసుకున్నప్పుడు దానికి సంబంధించిన అగ్రిమెంట్ రాయిస్తే కూడా రైతు భరోసా ఇద్దరికి వస్తుందని ఉంది, అది అవగాహన తెలుసు. కానీ ఎక్కడో భూ యజమానికి ఏంటంటే ఎప్పటి నుండో కొన్ని వందల ఎకరాలు వ్యవసాయం చేయకుండా వాళ్ళ చేతుల్లో భూమి ఉంది. వీళ్ళందరూ వ్యవసాయం చేసేవాళ్ళు చాలా మటుకు కౌలుకు ఇస్తున్న వాళ్ళు కొన్ని చోట్ల ఏమన్నా వ్యవసాయం చేస్తూ మిగిలింది ఇస్తున్నారేం కానీ రాయలసీమ ప్రాంతంలో ఎక్కడో పెద్ద పెద్ద జాబ్స్ చేస్తూ లేదంటే అక్కడ కొన్ని వందల ఎకరాలు ఆక్యుపై చేసుకుంటూ వాళ్ళ ఇది మన ల్యాండ్ సీలింగ్లో వెళ్ళినా కూడా రకరకాల పేర్లతో ఉంటున్న భూమిని అట్లా వదిలేయకుండా కౌలుకిస్తున్నారు. కానీ అది మాట మీద నడుస్తుంది. దీనివల్ల చాలా కౌలు రైతులు అనేది నష్టపోతున్నారు. అంటే వాళ్ళకి ముఖ్యంగా ఇన్పుట్ సబ్సిడీకి సంబంధించి కానీ వాళ్ళు పండించిన పంటకు మార్కెటింగ్ కానీ ఈ క్రాప్ బుకింగ్ కానీ, ఇప్పుడు ఈ క్రాప్ బుకింగ్ కూడా ఆటోమేటిక్గా చేయడానికి అవకాశం ఉంది అని చెప్తున్నారు. కానీ అది ఎవరు ఒప్పించాలి, ఎవరి బాధ్యత, గవర్నమెంట్ నుండి ఎవరు రెస్పాన్సిబిలిటీ తీసుకుంటున్నారు, అట్లాంటిది ఎక్కడా కూడా మనకు ప్రాక్టికల్గా కనిపించట్లేదు. ముఖ్యంగా వీటికంటే రైతు పెట్టుబడి పెట్టినప్పుడు కౌలు రైతు ఆత్మహత్య జరిగితే ఎంత ఘోరమైన పరిస్థితి ఉందంటే, కౌలు రైతుల ఆత్మహత్యలు ఈ మధ్యకాలంలో మేము బయటకు తీసినవి చాలా వందలు ఉన్నాయి. ఆ కౌలు రైతు ఆత్మహత్య జరిగితే తనకు భూమి ఉండదు కాబట్టి ఎస్గ్రేషియా రాదు, సిసిఆర్సి కార్డు ఉండదు, అన్ని విధాలా నష్టపోవడం అనేది జరుగుతుంది. అదే కాకుండా పండించిన పంటను ప్రొక్యూర్మెంట్ చేసినప్పుడు ప్రొక్యూర్మెంట్ సెంటర్ కొనడానికి లేదు, ఎందుకంటే ఈ క్రాప్ బుకింగ్లో వాళ్ళ పేరు ఉండదు. ముఖ్యంగా ఉమెన్ ఫార్మర్స్కి అస్సలే కానీ సీసీఆర్సీ కార్డులు కాదు కదా, కౌలుకి భూమి ఇవ్వాలంటే కూడా కూలిగానే చేయొచ్చు, కానీ కౌలుకి భూమిగా ఇవ్వంటే ఒంటరి మహిళలు ఉన్న వాళ్ళకు ఇవ్వరు చేయాలంటే కూడా. తర్వాత హస్బెండ్ అండ్ వైఫ్ ఉంటే ఎట్టి పరిస్థితిలో కూడా వాళ్ళకు వచ్చే పరిస్థితి లేదు. ఇవి పూర్తిగా గ్రాస్ రూట్ లెవెల్లో ఉన్న సమస్యలు.
Sorry, somehow the time planning for this session is going awry because of translations having to be built in. And multiple languages are being spoken and we didn't quite build in for it. I'm sorry about it. Bhanuja said that there is no identity for tenant farmers. Remember, this is an issue that's cropping up for multiple categories of farmers that we are discussing today. They don't have an identity, not even on paper. There's large-scale tenancy in states like Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, very large scale. I mean, numbers show 70-80% of land leasing in several parts of these states, and the same is true in other states of India. And she talked about how there are some progressive legislations but are not being implemented. She talked about a licensed cultivators act that used to exist in Andhra Pradesh, that exists in Telangana. And then she talked about how there was another act that was brought in called Crop Cultivators Rights Card Act. And even that is really lagging in its implementation. And she pointed out to the deep structural problems. She said that all these legislations also depend on the farmer who's leasing out land having to agree or announce formally with the government that yes, they have leased out land. And only based on such a explicit agreement from the landowner do these legislations work in giving any entitlements to the tenants. So she's talking about how these farmers, because of entrenched interests, these are farmers who for years have moved out of farming, but they want to enjoy the benefits that they get as farmers. They are absentee farmers who are getting various sorts of benefits, and they don't want to give up that benefit from the state. So they want to take 10-20,000 rupees or 40,000 from the tenant farmers. They also want to grab whatever they can get from the government, but they are not willing to say that I have leased out land to this person so that that person can get entitlements. So the schemes are failing and the laws are failing to actually benefit these tenant farmers. She talked about how even when it comes to farm suicides, where most number of suicides are being committed by tenant farmers in these states, multiple studies of Raita Swarajya Vedika have shown it. But even after killing themselves because they are not recognized as tenant farmers, in their death also, they are not recognized as farmers and they don't get any compensation. The family doesn't get any compensation. When they go to market what they have grown, because their names are not in the list of the government, because they have been invisibilized, they don't even get the benefit of procurement by the government. She talked about several such things, and these are deeply structural issues that she pointed out. I request Sudha Nagavarapu to lay on the table what exactly are the issues of agricultural workers, and please speak in English.
Now it's on. Yeah, I'm extremely privileged to speak about this issue after Dwarkatai spoke, Jagannath Majiji, Mahesh Garu, Jadegoda Garu, all the speakers on the stage, because there is so much knowledge here. So in all of these things, so within the invisibilized and marginalized, maybe agricultural laborers are further invisibilized and marginalized. women farmers are work as agricultural laborers, tenant farmers work as agricultural laborers. Agricultural laborers also work in Manrega, in the National Rural Employment Guarantee schemes. Agricultural laborers also migrate for work. They're migrant workers and they often migrate for agricultural work. So they then become doubly marginalized. They're working in Punjab, Haryana, Himachal, coastal Andhra, across the country. In 2020, during the COVID lockdown, when people were walking home, so many of them were agricultural laborers. We realized how many people were migrating to work in agriculture. Our understanding about that expanded during the lockdown because there are so many networks that take people across the country. Dwarkatai talked about how, as agricultural laborers and as tenant farmers, resources come to them last. Along with what she talked about, I'd also like to add irrigation. Bore wells are owned by big farmers. So the small and marginal farmers cannot access irrigation as easily. Irrigation often gets delayed, and whatever money they have put into farming, they have to recoup by doing agricultural labor. So when the issues of tenant farmers that have been put down by Mahesh Garu, Kiran, Bhanuja Garu, along with the fact that when there's a crop loss, they do not get compensation, they still have to pay the money, right? Whatever lease agreement is there, they have to return that money. So the group that I work with, ASHA Kisan Swaraj in Uttar Pradesh, most of these lease agreements are food grains. So they have to give 2 quintals of wheat. Whether or not they grew that much wheat is a different matter. They have to give that much. And most of the time, they go and work either on a farm or they migrate to the city. I mean, they have to do manual labor to repay that. So these are some of the problems. Then mechanization means that agricultural work is reducing. So as so many of the speakers here spoke about, these are the extremely marginalized communities in rural society. So they're usually Dalits, they're women, they're the landless, or they are the families who got this, who were allotted land either during government programs or through movements and struggles, and this land is very unproductive. So they are the ones with the least resources, the least agency. While there are always discussions of how there's not enough farm labor, all of that, these communities also have very little very little power to manage their work. So farm work is unpredictable, and now with climate change, that unpredictability has increased. So a farm labor family might think, okay, we will get 15 days of work this month. That may not happen. Then what do? So there is very little security in their lives. When Manrega was conceptualized, the idea was that this scheme would help rural families stay in the villages, not have to migrate. But as many of you would have heard, the implementation, the devil is in the details, and in the implementation, rural families are supposed to get 100 days of work. That is only possible with a lot of struggle. So SKMS, the Sangathan that I work with, some of those families have been able to leverage 100 days of work, but that has come after sustained struggles. And those 100 days of work are for a family. So for a family of 5 members, 6 members, this is not enough. What mechanization has meant is that sowing, weeding, and nowadays even harvesting, these were things done by farm labor. These are being done by machines now. And the penetration of machines is increasing. So the little work that they had access to is also compromised. Now, where the social security for farm workers is concerned, most of these are through universal schemes or near universal schemes such as the PDS. And I mean, it is good that they are not asked to prove that they are agricultural laborers, because so many people are, occupy these multiple roles. So they are eligible to all these various food security, social security schemes. But these schemes are not functioning as they should. The food security scheme is perhaps best termed a starvation protection scheme. It is not really providing food security. It is not providing nutrition. The social
Sudha,
security scheme.
sorry to interrupt you. I'm not sure whether we'll be able to come back to
fine.
you about solutions. No. What exactly? Say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What should be done?
Okay, first of all is the whole question of being visible. Farm labor is an intrinsic part of farming, especially of ecological farming. If you look at the presentations or the discussions over the past 2 days, in very few places have we seen numbers like, livelihood was provided for this many people, or this many labor hours, or this many labor days. Why do we not talk about labor? Why is everything in farming just the production, the profit, or, things like that? So we have to account for labor for SHG groups. SHG groups are asked to, do various tasks. What about the time and the labor that they expend in this? So that is one thing, just all this accounting. And I would say, that there has been this dream of many activists for a very long time. Ever since Manrega was conceptualized, how do we use Manrega for ecological farming? And I think we have taken some steps, but we need to take a lot more steps. It cannot just be in infrastructure, vermicompost pits or so on. It has to be for the actual work on the fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudha. Taking forward the discussion around solutions, may I ask Seema ji this question about the women farmers, the invisibilization of women farmers, which Shamla ji had laid out. She did talk about the identity issue, the lack of it, and hence all the other things that follows that. So how do we find solutions to these is a question I have, but also at the same time, if you could flag other issues which has been missed out. And before you start, may I also say that this is probably the first time in the ASHA Sammelan we are talking about the issues of agricultural laborers. So there has been discussions, quite a bit of discussions, but this is probably the first place where we have started identifying that invisibilized section. So thank you, Sudha, for laying it out really well. Seema ji.
So thank you, and good morning, Zindabad to everyone. I think we've already heard from Sharda, Dwarkatai, and I think also from what Bhanuja was trying to say in terms of the women who are tenant farmers, and increasingly many are, is what we are seeing in not just Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, but also in Maharashtra. So that's also, an invisible sort of category of women workers, women farmers that we need to attend to. Just to quickly put some figures to what Sharda has already spoken of in terms of, why this need even to, start talking about women farmers. I think, we all say farmers, and then, there could be a number of categories, suicide affected, there are agriculture workers. But I think the need, which was very strongly felt, to lay out and articulate the specific issues of women as farmers, I think really requires to be underscored, particularly the kind of experiences that were shared here. In terms of how the experience of being a woman and also being in a particular occupation, how does that affect you? So here I think what I wanted to just flag was all of the gender gaps that were pointed out by Sharda. I mean, whether it is in terms of land ownership, access to resources like water, forests, Also access to credit. I mean, all of credit that we talk of and what we heard yesterday in terms of, SHGs are the vanguards in a way for all of agroecology that we heard yesterday in the presentations. I think the kind of access to credit that we are talking about for women really remains in the realm of the SHG or the non-institutional access to credit. So why is it that if women are so engaged in farming and all of the allied activities, why is it that they do not have access to credit? And some of the figures that we have from data and from academic papers that we see clearly show that over the years, women have been account holders in banks. They have been depositing money, but they do not have access to that institutional credit commensurate to what deposits they are actually putting into the bank accounts. So the figure, the kind of discrimination that we are seeing here actually shows us that, among the female cultivators, it's only 26% of the female cultivators who actually have access to institutional credit as against about 52 to 55% men. In terms of deposits, the deposits that women are putting in, contributing to the institutional sector of finance, only 27% of the deposits actually come back in the form of credit. Now, these are very credible studies done through an analysis of data by a person who's in the RBI. So I think this is already telling in terms of women's access to banking. So whether it is the Kisan credit cards, but why do women have to constantly resort to small finance? It's always said about women that, you begin small, but why do you always also stay small? So that is a question, I think, that needs to be asked as to why not institutional credit, and then many of the issues that are being discussed in terms of access to a number of resources, agricultural inputs. In terms of land ownership, because many of the solutions are also going to come from a serious understanding of the data and why there is no disaggregation of this data at all. Why do we constantly need to place this in front of the policymakers that you do not have gender disaggregated data in land ownership? So all that we resort to is the agriculture census or studies that many of us try to do, which clearly show that it's nothing beyond 10 and 15%. Agriculture census talks of 15% of operational holding at the national level. Some states like Andhra Pradesh, of course, are anywhere between 30 and 33%. But the sad reality is that much of the country, we do not have operational holdings beyond the 15%. So here is a serious issue that we do not have it in policy. The solution which came from feminist activism, and we have a law, at least for the Hindus, the Hindu succession law, which talks about equal property rights to sons and daughters, but in the implementation, we are clearly seeing a major gap. So with land ownership of the kind of data we see here, but on the other hand is the engagement in agriculture. We have figures that the most recent periodic labor force data talks about over 70% women, female workers in rural areas engaged in agriculture. That's a very high percentage, and yet the data on ownership is absent, and what we see as operational holding is really very marginal. So these are huge gender gaps in terms of access to resources, natural resources, but also access to credit and other agricultural inputs. What comes by way as a Dalit farmer is also what Dwarkatai has shared here, that it's not just what happens to every farmer, but because she's a Dalit and because she's a woman, she's the last person to receive any of the resources that might be available to women farmers. So in this broader picture, we have a number of distressed categories that we are talking about. So whether it is the tenant farmers, the women tenant farmers, who on the one hand have to face what we say are the structures of inequality. So there is patriarchy. Because you're a woman, you're supposed to do all of that work in the domestic realm, which is fetching water, cooking meals, the good food and nutritious food that we're eating. I'm sure there are a number of women who are behind cooking that food. So all of this is considered as non-productive or domestic work or reproductive work. But if that work is not done, I think, even the farming that we are talking about would really not be possible. So in this entire, framing, what we speak of, this is all invisible work. And unless we visibilize this work, the solutions actually come from articulations of these problems of tenant farmers, women from farm suicide households. And this is something which, has been written about in academic journals, but very little in terms of campaigns and actions that we see. So over 4 lakh suicides were committed since 1995, and as many women have been left behind as unfortunately referred to as widows and not women farmers in their own rights. And all that the little attention that they receive is in the form of a compensation or an ex gratia amount, but not how they could rebuild their lives as farmers, as agriculturists. So I think that's something where the solutions lie, and not just in offering a compensation and offering solutions by way of continuing with the same mainstream paradigm of agriculture with chemical fertilizers, pesticides, while she's saying that, I want to have a different path. So I think that's where a solution probably should be offered, but recognition really becomes, the very first demand that as women farmers organizations, Makam or other organizations are talking about. So among the number of categories and the changing roles of women in farming, I think when Sudha spoke about agriculture workers, I think the very fact that there is so much precarity and uncertainty in women's lives, in the lives of marginal people, that you see that they are in diverse livelihood activities. I think we should really be, why are women as workers, as farmers, as cultivators in livestock, etc.? Because there is so much insecurity and complete lack of recognition there. So understanding the changing roles, documenting and disaggregating data are really very, very important to even look for solutions. The first sort of, if talking about solutions now, I would like to say that as part of the organization and the network that I'm working for, many are here from that network. One of the first things that we speak about is recognition and identity to the woman as a farmer. I think that occupational identity is extremely critical, and unless that recognition is not there, I think much of what comes by way of demands and entitlements will really not, be possible. But while we talk about recognition, voice, identity, and the entitlements, I think one of the major ways in which we try to articulate our solutions is to look at the broader frame of the agrarian distress. I don't think as Makam we would like to locate women's questions as only women as distressed and invisible farmers. But why are they in such a situation? And I think that broader framing is very critical. The agrarian distress that we are all talking about, extractivist, chemical intensive farming, taking away knowledge, devaluing people's knowledge, all of this really needs to be addressed firsthand. So unless we are talking of a systemic change in the way resources are held and used and distributed, I do not think we are going to find solutions for women farmers or various other marginalized groups. Having said that, I would also like to say that broader systemic change alone is not going to be sufficient unless we are also able to seriously look into questions of structural inequities. So when I say that, we have to look at caste, we have to look at patriarchy, we have to look at Adivasis and other marginalized and the intersections of all of this. So why as a Dalit, Adivasi woman farmer, my vulnerabilities and disadvantage is probably far more than a farmer who comes from a more privileged caste. So I think this simultaneity in actually trying to address issues and solutions is going to be very critical. So while we do say that agroecology is certainly the way forward, where you look at not devaluing women's knowledge and marginal people's knowledge, but at the same time, we do not want to see women as a means to achieve those. So they are not just carers and nurturers, but they are farmers in their own right, with dignity, with knowledge,
Seema,
and therefore they need to have access to resources.
if I may ask you, what do we do about the fact that women are being relegated in new institutional spaces being created as SHG members, and FPOs are largely visualized as male farmer spaces? Any quick thoughts on that? Because that's certainly being visualized as the marketing thing, and income flows into the FPO and members of FPO. So the woman works and the men in the FPOs earn more.
Absolutely.
What do we do about it?
In fact, that is what I was trying to say, because these are institutional forms, particularly the SHG. It's a time-tested institutional form, and everyone wants to use that form. But this is where we feel that while the SHGs are very, very powerful and can be the carrier in a sense, but where is the woman in that is something I think that we really need to be serious about. And the same thing is about FPO. So it's not just the institutional form and the activities that the institutional form engages in, whether it's procurement, marketing. Yes, we want women there. We want women in procurement centers, just so that women farmers are comfortable in occupying the spaces and going to those markets. We've heard those stories. There's so much in interlocked markets that all women FPOs would be very much something that is a favored kind of a solution possibly. But these institutional forms, if they really have to be, let's say, feminist institutional forms, then we need to have a rethink and reimagine those spaces. So they can not just be, a means to achieve a particular end.
Right, thank you so much. May I request Kiran to talk about tenant farmers, please? Kiran, you could continue sitting and talking. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm more comfortable standing and talking. So about the tenant farmers issues, I think that if we want to, like what Seema was saying, we need to look at the structural inequalities in the society. So ultimately, most of the inequalities in our society come from land ownership. Who has land and who has land under their control. So for example, Vegi Mahesh, he was talking about the fact that their family has 1.5 acres of land, but in their own village, there are families which have 25 acres, there are families which have 50 acres of land also. So I think the basic question is, what is it that actually makes one family have 50 acres, another family have only 1 acre, another family has no land at all? That is the basic structural inequality which is there, which is being passed on generation over generation over generation. So, of course, to address that issue, some land reforms have been brought in, and land ceiling laws have been brought in. Anybody who has above a certain extent of land, that land is supposed to be taken by the government and distributed to the landless poor people in the village. But those have been implemented only half-heartedly. So I'm not saying that as a solution, now we need to take away all the land about 10 acres or something. That's a different discussion altogether. But all I'm saying is that unless we recognize that there is a very deep injustice in the way that land is held in villages in every state, our response to this problem, I think, will not be that strong enough. So it comes out of a deep injustice. So now, if you look at the problem of tenant farmers, his case is a very typical case that, somebody has a small piece of land, they're a marginal farmer, less than 2 acres of land, but then that is not sufficient to make livelihood, therefore they are, taking more land on lease. There are many cases where they are completely landless farmers also who are taking land on lease and cultivating. Now these tenant farmers are facing like a triple blow. On the one hand, apart from all the other costs of cultivation that farmers have, they have to pay an additional lease amount. So their cost of cultivation itself is up by 10,000, 20,000 rupees per acre because they have to pay the lease. Second blow is that none of the support systems which is available for farmers in general, whether it's low interest loans or crop insurance or disaster compensation or various subsidy schemes, whatever it is from the system is not available for them. That is the second blow. The third blow is that because they're not getting the access to credit and so on, they actually have to borrow money for doing cultivation from local dealers. And that puts them in a nexus. So the same dealers who sell seeds, who sell fertilizers, also give them loans. So they have to also purchase their inputs from them at whatever cost. They don't have a bargaining power. So they are in this nexus where they're taking money from the dealers, then they have to pay it back, and the same dealer may actually be purchasing their cotton or rice or whatever. So they actually don't have any bargaining capacity either for purchasing inputs or for selling their output. So this is the third blow. So this is the kind of situation that land leasing farmers are facing. So now, one more thing to recognize is the scale of the problem. Normally, I think because there is no official recording of tenant farmers or leasing farmers in most of the states, the scale of the problem is also invisibilized. But if we look at the NSSO data, it says that about 17.3%, this is the latest one from 2018-19, 17.3% of land holdings are cultivated by tenant farmers. And that is a big underestimate. I think in general we can say that it will be about close to double that number. In Andhra Pradesh, the official number NSSO is about 42%, but really if we go into many districts, it's almost 80 to 90%. So on an average, I think in Andhra Pradesh, it's like about 50 to 60%. In Telangana, it's about 33%. We did an extensive survey of about 4,000 farmers. We found that about 33% are tenant farmers. We had studies in Uttar Pradesh where officially it says only about 18%, but they found that 72% in some districts, they did this study in 8 districts of Uttar Pradesh, they found that 72% of land holdings are being cultivated by tenant farmers. So the scale of the problem is very huge, and it's also increasing because many of the land owning families, their next generations and all that, they are not even living in the villages, or they are not in cultivation, they are doing other jobs, businesses and so on, or they have migrated somewhere else. So the number of farmers who are actually, the number of landowners who are not cultivating their own land but actually leasing it out to other people is also increasing. So this is an increasing scale of problem. And because the actual cultivators who are cultivating the land are not being recorded, what is happening is that all the different support systems are extending only to the land owners. And now increasingly there are all these DBT schemes, direct benefit transfer schemes. It can be PM Kisan at the national level, or Raitu Bandhu or Kalia, or different schemes. There's Krishak Bandhu in West Bengal. Many of these schemes are going only to the land owning families. It's only based on the land patta, whoever name is on the patta, they get the amount. Now, in Telangana, if we take the example, there's the Raitu Bandhu scheme where 15,000 crore rupees are being spent, 15,000 crore rupees just to one scheme in one state government. Out of that, about at least 6,000 crores is going to people who are not cultivating their land at all. It's going to their accounts. It is meant as investment support, so that it helps them plow the land, buy inputs and so on. It's all not going to the actual cultivators but to the landowners. So actually because of this increase in cash support schemes, what is happening is that now landowners are even more reluctant to acknowledge that they are giving their land on lease. So if we look at, what is the way out of this, right? What are the solutions? I think number one, we have to insist that in any piece of land, there should be a system of recording who is actually cultivating the land. And this is actually basic principle of most of the revenue laws in most of the states, which is already existing, that every year they are supposed to note the name of the cultivator along with the name of the owner of the land. In every year, every season, they're supposed to note, which is not happening. But at least in places like Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, there are laws which have been brought about, which also came through a lot of struggle and demand from farmers organizations and so on, that it is the government's responsibility to identify who is a tenant farmer, who is a cultivator in that particular piece of land, and then they have to be given some kind of a card. So that's the Licensed Cultivators Act, which was brought in 2011 in Andhra Pradesh, which was the United Andhra Pradesh. Now it's operational both in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh after splitting. So as per that act, any tenant farmer can make a very simple application, just specifying in this survey number, which belongs to this particular landowner, I am taking 3.5 acres of land and cultivating, and that's it. Once you provide that information, the onus is on the local revenue officials to do a process of verification. Process of verification can be very simple. It can be done in a Gram Sabha. See, the whole amazing thing in this whole situation is that every person in a village knows who is cultivating whose land. You go to a village, you find out, okay, this person has this 10 acres of land, who's cultivating their land. Most people will be able to tell that Falana other person is cultivating 5 acres, another person is cultivating 3 acres. So this is an information which is there with everybody in the village. So to bring information, which is public information, there with everybody in the village onto a record should not be difficult if there is a political will. So that is the bottom line of actually this kind of an act being in place, that the tenant farmers should be recorded based on a simple application and verification in a Gram Sabha. And suppose some landowner objects that, no, actually I am cultivating this piece of land, okay, fine, you don't give it to that tenant farmer. But what we found is that in the implementation of that law, a lot of lakhs of farmers were able to get this LEC card, right? But there's also this other thing which the Niti Aayog has come up with. They also recognize that this is a major problem. This whole land leasing is increasing, and unless we address the issue of land leasing and provide some kind of a recognition, it becomes very difficult to address the crisis in agriculture, right? So that basic recognition was there, and Niti Aayog constituted a committee. They came up with a model law. But the flaw in that law is that it puts the onus on the tenant farmer to come up with an agreement with the landowner, and they both need to get it registered. So both the tenant farmer and the landowner should together get their land lease registered, and only then that land lease will be registered, and then the schemes and other support systems can be extended to tenant farmer. And in Andhra Pradesh in 2019, a law was brought based on the Niti Aayog's model law. And last 3 years of experience, we've done an extensive study on this, has shown that this law doesn't work for the basic reason that landowners are not ready to put their signature on any piece of paper which acknowledges that they are giving their land on lease. So therefore, this Niti Aayog's conception that actually, the landowner and the tenant farmer can come together, sign an agreement, go and get it registered, actually doesn't work on the ground. So the solution in terms of an act would be to have an act where the onus is on the government, on the local officials to ascertain who is cultivating which land and give them some kind of a recognition card. You may not enter it into the revenue records because landowners are very afraid of any entry being made into revenue records because of the old tenancy laws which are in place and so on. That is fine, but at least give the recognition in the form of some other card. So that is, so a third kind of solution which is also working in some places is that for some particular schemes, without any act being in place, without any legal backing, also in a scheme you can have guidelines which will make sure that the actual cultivator is recorded. Those kind of schemes are also working in some places. Just yesterday we were having the tenant farmer session. In Haryana they have this Mera Fasal, Mera Boira kind of scheme where they are actually recording the cultivators. They are saying that it's working decently. There are some other schemes like Kalia scheme and so on. But the problem is that these schemes without a legal backing, very soon they can actually fall into a situation where the landowners do not allow the tenant farmer's name to be recorded. That is what is happening in Karnataka also. There is an e-crop booking, electronic crop booking system, but only landowner's name is recorded, the tenant farmer's name is not recorded. Same thing happens in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana also. So what we believe is that actually a legal backing is definitely necessary, so that kind of a law needs to be in place. So just in terms of a last point that I would like to make as a action agenda for us in terms of going forward, anybody who is interested in other states to take up this issue, we had some people from Telangana, from Karnataka, from Haryana, and from West Bengal also showing interest, in our parallel sessions. First thing that we can do actually is to do a study. And that is an easy thing to do because we already have a template of a study that we have done in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, where we can go to a particular village and do a door-to-door survey of all the people in that village. So we'll get a real picture. How much land is being cultivated? How much is being cultivated by landowners? How much is being cultivated by people taking it on lease, on sharecropping or tenant farmers? That kind of a study can be done. Once we do that in 10, 20 villages, whatever, or in one district, 2 districts. We did it in Telangana in about 15 districts and in Andhra Pradesh in about 10 districts. And it gave us a very clear picture of what is actually happening on the ground. So that can be a starting point so that we can actually then, within the state, depending on your context, there can be a discussion built around, okay, so this 20% are tenant farmers or 33% are tenant farmers, what is happening to them, what are the problems they are facing, and then how do we come up with a solution? And the local demands can be developed around that. So that is what I would suggest if we can do as a follow-up of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran. So there remains a question of solutions to the problems that Adivasi farmers are facing. So in this, I would actually like to ask Dr. Jadegowda as well as Jagannath ji about how do we see these solutions happening. Dr. Jadegowda, you spoke about how land rights as an issue, how mainstream idea of agriculture being pushed to Adivasi farmers are happening, which is quite opposite to what has been there as a system, as a value in tribal agriculture. So how do you think solutions will happen? And would like to hear your thoughts on it. And when you do that, it will also be good if you can talk about how, the way the ASHA Sammelan has been looking at the discussion notes is by looking at how does Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar, how does society, governments and markets intervene in finding solutions. So if you could at least touch upon the Samaj, Sarkar part, that itself will be good.
Actually, I am a scientist. I am not involved in various sociological issues. But of course, there are some tribal farmers, their land holding is very less than 1 acre. So this type of land tenancy issue is not there in among Soliga tribals in the Karnataka, especially amongst forest tribes. But the thing is, the government is giving a lot of issues. Schemes are there implementing, but I would say that they are implementing, government is implementing some of these schemes, the tribals are now taking, but thing is, they are not empowered to take all the schemes. So government has to give some priority for the forest tribes with respect to agriculture, promotion of this integrated farming, organic farming, all those things they should be given priority. And also government also should provide some right for them to collect minor forest product which are good for their livelihood. Nearly 50% of income is through the collection of minor forest for the local tribes. So there are a lot of restrictions from the forest department. Of course, there are some legal issues that they should come up, but they should partner the communities for the conservation. Like, we, with the help of the forest department and the NGOs and the government, like forest department, NGOs and tribal communities, but the sanghas, we call it community development sanghas. Soliga Buddhi Sangha, many sanghas are there. They should make a partner in managing the forest resources, as well as in providing some certain, like there are some relocation packages for the tribes in Nagarole and other areas. So there are some issues. If they are willing to come from forest area to outside, the government has to give some this kind of facilities for them. These are the things. And more importantly, we should give more emphasis for the education. The education is the only issue for empowering them. For Lord, like Dr. Sudarshan is doing wonderful work for this, and many NGOs are doing good work. Education should be the right way. There should be legal awareness among the people also about Forest Rights Act. The Forest Act, many people in Forest Department officials are not aware of what is Forest Rights Act. They are simply talking, they try to evict out. Because I know, actually, my students, more than 200 of them become range forest officers, more than 25 of them DCFs. I tell them not to harass the people. They should make the people by training them or giving some program about the Forest Rights Act, how to implement, and they should also helpful. They should also willing to help the people. That is the thing. And these are the social issues that I am thinking, because I have been teaching in the university. I am not a social workers and all. Some of the issues legally they should helpful, and moreover, the people should live in a very harmonious way without. The tribal how they live, they treat each one is equal. So the same thing should be there. Unfortunately, the rich and poor gap is more. That's what is these problems are prevailing. There are so many things, so many values that we can learn from the tribals. Thank you.
थैंक यू डॉक्टर जडेगौड़ा. सो जगन्नाथ जी, तो वही सवाल मैं आपके पास भी लेके आ रहा हूँ कि समाधान जो आदिवासी किसान आज जो मसले समस्या जो फेस कर रहे हैं, उसका समाधान आप किस तरह से देख रहे हैं. उसमें मैं एक और चीज़ जोड़ना चाहूँगा जो जडेगौड़ा जी ने बताया, जिसके बारे में अलग अलग मत है यहाँ पे, कि जो हमारे जो मॉडर्न एजुकेशन सिस्टम है, जो मॉडर्न वैल्यू सिस्टम्स है, वो हमें वहाँ भी लेके जाना चाहिए. वैसा उनका एक मानना था कि एजुकेशन इज़ द ओनली वे आउट, कि उनको एजुकेट किया जाए. लेकिन आप जिस तरह से आपने जब कुटुंब की बात की कि एक आदिवासी दृष्टिकोण है दुनिया को देखने का, उसमें ये मॉडर्न सिस्टम्स जो एजुकेशन की हो या नए तकनीकें आ रहे हैं खेती में, उन सबको कैसे देखा जा सकता है और उसका कैसे समाधान, कैसा हम इसका सोल्यूशन ढूंढ सकते हैं.
फिर से एक बार सबको मेरा नमस्ते. हम जो सोचते हैं, अब ये जो हमारा जो सोच है, कुछ जगह में कुछ जो सोच को जो हम जो सोचते हैं, ये सोच दूसरा कुछ चीज़ें में नहीं, माने वो सोच क्या बोलते हैं, वो सोच नहीं लग सकता है. मतलब वो सोच उनको अंदर नहीं जा सकता है. तो हम जो आदिवासी एरिया में अभी से नहीं, पूर्वज से पहले से जो सोच है, और उसी सोच को हम यहाँ लेकर आते हैं. लेकिन फिर भी जो आजकल का जो कुछ चीज़ें, वो भी हमारे साथ रहना चाहिए. ऐसा नहीं है कि पूरा सब कुछ नहीं चाहिए. अभी कुछ जो चीज़ें हैं, खेती का ऊपर अगर हम देखें तो जिस तरह का जो पहले जो बात किया था, सबके साथ रहना तो चाहिए, वो सब करना चाहिए. लेकिन एक तो हम खुद का जो सोच को सोच को जो जिंदा रखना चाहिए. अगर मुझे जितना चाहिए उतना मुझे ज़रूरत है। मतलब जितना मुझे चाहिए उतना मैं लूँगा और सबको अच्छा से रहना चाहिए। ये सोच अगर रहेगा तो मिट्टी भी जिंदा रहेगा और पर्यावरण जिंदा रहेगा, हम सब कुछ भी रहेंगे। अगर माँ को दूध पीना है तो मेरे भाई को भी पीना है, तो मैं अगर माँ को निचोड़ करके मैं ही सब कुछ दूध पी लूँगा तो मेरा माँ तो मर जाएगा, मेरा भाई भी आगे वो जिंदा नहीं रहेंगे। तो इसका जो सोच है उसी सोच के साथ मैंने आगे बढ़ना चाहिए मुझे लग रहा है। और जो शिक्षा के ऊपर कुछ कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो हमारा जो आदिवासी एरिया में इतना सारे चीज़ें जो आ रहा है, खतरा बाहर का जो खतरा है जंगल का ऊपर, ज़मीन का ऊपर और जो खेती का ऊपर और जो व्यवस्था के ऊपर जो आ रहा है, तो ये इसीलिए शिक्षा का मतलब सिर्फ स्कूल में जो पढ़ाई करना ये शिक्षा नहीं है। शिक्षा हमारा जो सोच है, शिक्षा का मतलब जो दूसरा भी जो कुछ गांव में और कुछ जो चीज़ें जो नहीं लिखा जा रहा है वो भी एक जो शिक्षा है। लेकिन वो जो बाहर का जो शिक्षा है वो शिक्षा भी चाहिए, क्या कि कुछ कुछ चीज़ें बाहर का जो व्यवस्था के साथ जवाब देना पड़ता है। तो इसीलिए बाहर का जो शिक्षा भी चाहिए और खुद का जो व्यवस्था के ऊपर जो शिक्षा है वो शिक्षा भी बहुत ज़रूरी है। अगर वो जो बाहर का जो शिक्षा आ गया, खुद का जो शिक्षा और नहीं रहेगा तब भी बहुत बड़ा समस्या आएगा कि जो हमारा जो परिचय है, हमारा जो असली जो शिक्षा है, जो जान है जो शिक्षा में, वो शिक्षा पूरा नुकसान हो जाएगा। इसीलिए मैं उस शिक्षा को भी होना चाहिए और जो हमारा जो पारंपरिक जो व्यवस्था के ऊपर पूर्वों से पहले से जो शिक्षा है वो बहुत सारा जगह में होंगे। जंगल का ऊपर जो संस्कृति का खुद का जो परिचय के ऊपर जो शिक्षा है और खेत का ऊपर जो शिक्षा है, और वो शिक्षा ज़रूरत है मुझे लग रहा है। क्या कि वो शिक्षा अगर नहीं रहेगा तो वो जो हमारा जो खुद का जो शिक्षा नहीं रहेगा तो वो पेस्टिसाइड वाला का दुकान में जाओ पूछो तो ये क्या डालूंगा, ये तो हो जाएगा। तो इसीलिए हमारा जो शिक्षा भी चाहिए और बाहर का जो शिक्षा चाहिए। तो हमारा एरिया में जो जंगल में बहुत सारा खतरे में है और बहुत सारा FRA लिखे हैं, लेकिन अभी तक कोई कुछ नहीं हो पा रहा है। तो इसीलिए हमारा जो यूथ लोगों को थोड़ा सा बाहर का जो कानून जो व्यवस्था है उस कानून व्यवस्था को भी जानना पड़ेगा। तो क्या करने से क्या क्या होगा, तो मुझे लग रहा है कानून व्यवस्था भी हमारा भी एक कानून व्यवस्था है, आदिवासी का जो कानून व्यवस्था है उस कानून व्यवस्था को जिंदा रखते हुए तो बाहर का जो कानून व्यवस्था को भी जानना चाहिए, ज़रूरत है। क्या कि बाहर का जो व्यवस्था के साथ हमारा जो मुकाबला करके आगे कैसे बढ़ सकते हैं। तो और इतना ही है। और जो खेत है हमारा खेत जैसा नहीं देखते हैं, वो तो हमारा ज़िंदगी का एक हिस्सा है, कल्चर है। माने खेत उसको दूसरा नज़रिया से हम नहीं देखते हैं, हमारी एक शरीर का एक अंग है। तो इसीलिए उसको कैसे हम जिंदा रख सकते हैं ताकि हमारा अगले और एक पार्ट भी जिंदा रह सकेगा। तो नमस्ते, इतना ही मेरा कहना।
So much, जगन्नाथ जी। आपने कहा था कि हम आई एम सेइंग दिस इन हिंदी। Jagannath ji said that it's very, very important to keep alive he kept using the word soch. I am translating it as our world views. That we have to keep alive our world views. That's the way things will improve. We don't reject everything modern. There are some things that we may want from modernity, but keeping our world views alive, which basically say that, get something for your needs and make sure others also have for their needs. That is the bottom line, and not exceeding that. So if modernity has something to offer on that front, that is all right. But this worldview has to be kept alive. We being attacked from all sides in a variety of ways on our way of thinking, living, education, and various levels of attack. And he said education is not just about what you learn in a classroom in a school. Education is that which you get from our forests, lands, and from all around us. And this education, where knowledge is coming from our natural resources and so on, it has life in it. That education which has life in it is very much needed. So we won't reject the modern education system, but it has to be additional to education that has life in it. And he said that similarly, when it comes to legal rights and legal regimes, we have our own ways of ensuring justice. We have our own legal systems, if you like. But along with keeping it alive, we also need to understand how this nation's statutes are working and the governmental statutes are working. So we need legal literacy, as it's called. On FRA, he said that many of us have applied both for IFRs and community forest rights. It's not moving forward. FRA is useful and we need several parts of it implemented. And finally, he said, our way of looking at our farms, that should be part of any agricultural imagination that we have for ourselves. And that is an integral part of ourselves. It's not something from where you are extracting the most in an exploitative fashion. It's a part of ourselves. It's a part of my body. My farm is part of my life, and I want to keep it alive. And that's the only way agriculture should be visualized. And he thanked us. And he said that solutions remain in holding alive and ensuring these worldviews and these perspectives being there. We will end this session. I actually, on behalf of the organizers, I'm feeling somewhat bad that many issues that could have been touched in greater detail were not possible because of the way we structured this session and thought of the time slot that was available. We went wrong quite significantly, probably. But I'm glad that all of you panelists here, in the limited time that you were given, flagged deep structural issues, systemic issues, and also gave solutions about things that could still be changed even if the structural issues are not addressed immediately. You emphasized, of course, that structural issues, whether it's of patriarchy, whether it is of caste or ethnicity, have to be looked into. But you also pointed us in directions where, meaningful solutions are still possible, even as we look for structural change. Thank you so much for all the inputs that you provided. My apologies once again that this session didn't give you adequate time for all the things that you would have liked to have brought out. Thanks again. In this hall, in this very hall, we will have youth and agriculture session in about 10 minutes or so. In about 8 minutes, I request Benson, Isaac to be around and Samvada team to be around to take that forward. Someone there should be announcing youth and agriculture session here. The Karnataka session on Raita Cheluvalli, that will happen in Ganga Auditorium. And we have 19 expert farmers that you can interact with here in the Convocation Hall building, on the first floor, on the wing here, as well as in the Science Bhavan, in all the 10 classrooms, as well as foyer spaces that are available in the Science Bhavan, especially on the second floor of the Science Bhavan, and in the Nala block. Please do make good use of all these parallel sessions that are happening. Have a quick lunch, and our valedictory session will start on time at 2:30. At 2:30, the valedictory session here. Thank you so much. Like I